humanity has traversed into an unfamiliar oceanic realm, finding refuge within the belly of a colossal fish known as the phantasmic Leviathan. In this strange world, humans are tasked with assisting the phantasmic Leviathan in eliminating harmful organisms residing within its stomach, while the Leviathan, in turn, seeks out resource caches to aid human development. The creatures inhabiting this marine expanse are astonishingly massive, with even parasites dwarfing human size. To survive, humans must incessantly procure resource caches to enhance their abilities and equipment, engaging in fierce battles against the intruding entities within the Leviathan's gut. Amidst the struggles of all, our protagonist, Zhou 1, stands out endowed with the unique ability to hear the whispers of the Leviathan. He secures 3 times the resource caches on his first day of arrival, placing him far ahead in the early stages. Highlights include hardcore survival, habitat construction, agriculture and livestock rearing, character evolution, equipment upgrades, dungeon exploration, giant fish cultivation, October aerial events, and maritime supremacy. Suddenly, a deluge of seawater surged into the darkened space. Gurgling, gurgling. Amid the shadows, a series of choking coughs echoed, followed by the splashing of arms against the water's surface as a figure struggled to emerge from the depths. Cough, 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 cough. Zhou gasped for air, only to be met with a fit of violent coughing. What in the world? Cough, cough. Has my home been flooded? Zhou wheezed, glancing around the pitch-black surroundings, realizing that half of his body remained submerged in water. Before he could grasp the situation, the seawater, which had engulfed him up to his waist, began to recede rapidly. In no time, the water vanished entirely, leaving only a damp ground behind. What on earth is happening? Zhou found himself utterly bewildered. However, he had already realized that he was not in his home, as this space was enveloped in complete darkness, where one could not see their own hand. His residence, located in the city, could never be this profoundly dark, even at night. As he moved his feet, he discovered that the surface beneath him felt peculiar, akin to stepping on rubber, with a remarkably soft texture. Just as Zhou was about to embark on an exploration, a notification suddenly resonated in his mind. Ding! Welcome to the survival world within the giant fish. You will now coexist with the giant fish and explore this unknown realm. Ding! Initial supplies are being distributed. In the next moment, Zhou sensed something falling at his feet due to the darkness. He crouched down to feel around and discovered a wooden box, which he promptly opened. Ding! Acquired bread X3. Acquired mineral water X3. Acquired hand-cranked lantern X1. As he opened the box, a series of notification sounds rang out. Zhou paused momentarily before swiftly picking up the hand-cranked lantern and turning it on, casting a warm yellow light that dispelled the darkness before him. The illumination was not particularly strong, merely sufficing to illuminate a radius of 2 to 3 meters. Yet, as he maneuvered the light, Zhou managed to discern the environment in which he found himself. Surrounded entirely by blood-red flesh walls, he found himself, as the system prompt indicated, within the stomach of a colossal fish. Zhou was momentarily taken aback, but soon regained his composure. The system had assured him that they shared a symbiotic relationship with the giant fish, implying that he was in no imminent danger within its gastric confines. Ding! Initial supplies have been successfully distributed. We hope that all survivors can thrive. Following this announcement, his mind fell into a tranquil silence, devoid of further auditory stimuli. During this period, Zhou utilized the beam of his headlamp to scrutinize the spatial confines of the stomach. The area was not extensive, and he quickly garnered a general understanding of his surroundings. The stomach's dimensions measured approximately 5 by 5 by 3 meters. At the farthest end lay a pool filled with a yellowish liquid, exuding an unpleasant odor. The pool, roughly 3 meters in diameter, appeared to be the giant fish's designated area for digesting its food. Having initially grasped the situation, a translucent blue screen manifested before Zhou, delineating 4 distinct channels: communication channel, trading channel, biological compendium, and physical attributes. The communication and trading channels were self-explanatory, serving the purposes of dialogue and the exchange of goods. The biological compendium seemed to document various creatures, though it was largely blank at present, recording only one species: illusory Leviathan. Age 1 day. Stage, neonatal. Length, 30 meters. Weight, 180 tons. Diet, algae. Feeding method, filter feeding. Evaluation, a 180-ton infant. Alas, Zhou exclaimed, taken aback after reviewing all the information. 30 meters, weighing 180 tons, and it has only just been born. If it reaches adulthood, what a formidable creature it will become. This shape-shifting Leviathan was evidently the entity he was symbiotic with, the sole being from this world he had encountered. Next, Zhou accessed the section detailing his physical attributes. Zhou average human attributes are rated at 10. Intelligence, 10. Strength, 7. Constitution, 9. Speed, 11. Evaluation, a relatively healthy individual. As Zhou scrutinized his physical data, he compared it to his own condition and found it to be quite accurate. His profession was that of a beleaguered programmer, confined to a desk each day, resulting in his strength naturally falling below the average human level. Nonetheless, Zhou prioritized his health, engaging in daily runs to ensure he did not become overly frail thus. His speed attribute slightly exceeded that of the average person, and his constitution was comparable. At that moment, the headlamp's power was depleted, plunging Zhou once again into darkness. Fortunately, the headlamp was hand-cranked, and Zhou remained unperturbed as he settled onto a supply crate, cranking the lamp while simultaneously accessing the World Communication Channel. At that juncture, the World Communication Channel was abuzz with numerous messages. Help! I was just eating fish, and, in the blink of an eye, I was devoured by one. Is this karma? It's astonishing that a survival world akin to that described in novels truly exists. I wonder if anyone possesses a built-in cheat system. Oh, great ones. Please take me along. Curse it, this is the first time in my life I've won the lottery, and you want to play time traveler with me. Indeed, it's quite unfortunate. How much did you win, brother? $5. Huh, $5, and you're making such a fuss. I thought you won $5 billion. Wait, what are you all actually discussing? Shouldn't we be contemplating what to do next? Having just arrived in this world, who knows what to do? The world system hasn't provided any guidance, so it's best not to act rashly. The messages in the world channel flickered by an astonishing speed, leaving Zhou momentarily overwhelmed. However, as soon as that thought crossed his mind, the messages in the communication channel ceased their rapid display, allowing him to scroll through them at a more leisurely pace. Zhou shook his head at the plethora of trivial messages, but he acknowledged that some of them were indeed correct. Given the ambiguity of the current situation, it was wise to refrain from hasty actions. Suddenly, the entire space began to tremble, and the surrounding fleshy walls started to quiver slightly. Zhou lost his balance and fell to the ground, but the soft surface cushioned his fall, leaving him unscathed. The tremors persisted for several seconds before significantly subsiding. The space within his stomach became more stable, although there were still minor vibrations. They posed no substantial threat to Zhou. He speculated that the illusory Leviathan had commenced its activity. A rumbling sound echoed from the direction of his esophagus, and Zhou sensed impending danger. Clutching his supply box, he pressed himself against the stomach wall, bracing for what was to come. In the next moment, the diaphragm of the esophagus opened, and a torrent of seawater surged into the gastric cavity. Despite Zhou's prior preparations, he was nearly swept away by the fierce current. The seawater within the gastric space rose to waist height before beginning to recede. This time, equipped with a headlamp, Zhou discerned that the water was being expelled from the digestive chamber. Once the seawater had drained away, a wooden box identical to the initial supply crate materialized before Zhou. A supply crate? He hurriedly approached to open it. Ding! Obtained bread X1. Obtained mineral water X1. So this is how one acquires supplies, Zhou murmured, casually opening the World Communication Channel. Many others were in a similar predicament, only experiencing a slight time lag. Do we simply wait for the manifestation of Leviathan each day to locate supply crates? Doubt flickered in Zhou's mind. After a while, the sound of flowing water echoed once more from the esophageal direction of the gastric space. This time, Zhou had learned his lesson. He crouched down to brace against the incoming current. As the water level began to rise, he gradually stood up to avoid being submerged. Once again, the seawater was expelled, but this time, instead of supply crate, a plethora of algal plants emerged. In the ensuing period, seawater continued to flood the gastric space, accompanied by an abundance of algae, which swiftly occupied 2/3 of the cavity. Then, the entire gastric space settled into tranquility, no longer vibrating slightly, as if the manifestation of Leviathan had ceased its activity. Oh dear, I am quite full, I must digest. A childlike voice inexplicably resonated in Zhou's mind. Zhou's expression shifted as he utilized the dim, yellow glow of his headlamp to search the remaining third of the space. Yet he discovered nothing. From where does this child's voice originate? Being alone in a darkened environment, The sudden emergence of a child's voice caused Zhou Wen's heart to flutter, leading him to suspect the presence of something unwholesome. Chapter 2. Self-destruction. Zhou Wen, plagued by suspicion, pondered for a while, only to realize that he was in a world of survival, where no malevolent entities could possibly exist. As he carefully recalled the sound he had just heard and considered the current circumstances, a hypothesis emerged in his mind. Could it be that the Leviathan was speaking? To validate his conjecture, Zhou Wen reopened the world communication channel, hoping to discover if others shared his experiences. However, the discourse therein was solely focused on whether seaweed was edible. No one mentioned the voice of a child. Had he misjudged? Zhou Wen meticulously reviewed the messages in the channel once more, confirming that no one had brought it up, yet he was certain that he had not imagined it. Could it be that only I can hear it? A spark ignited in Zhou Wen's eyes, suggesting that he was indeed a unique presence. Was this my golden finger? Am I the protagonist? The more he contemplated, the more exhilarated he became, increasingly convinced of his distinctiveness. In that moment, he felt like the sovereign of this world. Yet, he quickly regained his composure, for after some reflection, he realized that this ability seemed rather inconsequential. He had attempted to communicate with the Leviathan, but received no response, indicating that while he could hear its voice, he could not command it. Thus, this ability offered him little assistance. As Zhou Wen contemplated how to leverage this newfound ability, he felt a slow and rhythmic movement within his stomach, as the seaweed accumulated there began to inch toward the digestive pool, stirred by the gentle contractions of his stomach. However, the process was exceedingly slow. Zhou Wen stared intently for an extended period, during which the headlamp's battery had depleted once, and the seaweed had only shifted slightly. At this rate of movement, it would take at least 7 or 8 hours to push the seaweed into the digestion pool. This digestion process was remarkably sluggish. Zhou Wen complained. Suddenly, his expression changed. The Leviathan, in its transformed state, had ceased its activity to digest food, and this process was taking an inordinate amount of time. What would happen if I assisted it in accelerating the digestion? With this thought, Zhou Wen sprang into action, seizing a considerable amount of seaweed and swiftly making his way to the digestion pool, where he cast the seaweed into its depths. Back and forth repeatedly, Zhou Wen spent an entire hour transporting all the seaweed from the stomach space. Huff, huff. Why is breathing so difficult? Zhou Wen gasped deeply. Yet no matter how he adjusted his breathing rhythm, he still felt a sense of suffocation. At that moment, he realized a critical issue. Where was the oxygen in the stomach space sourced from? If the stomach space did not autonomously generate oxygen, then his earlier actions of transporting the seaweed had evidently accelerated the consumption of oxygen. No way am I courting death. With this thought, Zhou Wen felt a wave of despair wash over him, as the diminishing supply of breathable oxygen instilled a profound fear of death within him. Sometimes, intelligence can be a double-edged sword. Zhou Wen now felt an overwhelming sense of regret, collapsing onto the ground and striving to minimize his bodily movements. However, the ever-diminishing oxygen supply rendered his breathing increasingly labored, leaving his mind foggy from hypoxia. What a fool I am! Zhou Wen cursed himself inwardly, feeling as though death was imminent. Just as he was on the brink of suffocation, a violent tremor surged through his abdominal cavity, and the Leviathan's essence stirred once more, followed by a deluge of seawater. With a sudden jolt, Zhou Wen burst forth from beneath the surface, gasping desperately for air. As the seawater rushed in, it was accompanied by a breath of fresh oxygen. He inhaled deeply, managing to regain some semblance of composure, resting against the wall of his stomach to alleviate the weakness brought on by the earlier lack of air. Once the seawater receded, he found himself nearly restored. What close call! Zhou Wen sat down heavily, a wave of trepidation washing over him as he realized the fine line between life and death. At that moment, his headlamp flickered out, prompting him to wind it up for a recharge. When the light illuminated again, a brand new supply crate appeared in the distance. A new supply crate? Zhou Wen rose to search for his 2 previous crates, which he had neglected to secure when the seawater flooded in. Uncertain of their whereabouts, he noticed that the crate before him was evidently untouched. He carried this new supply crate to his side before embarking on a quest to locate the earlier 2. The prior crates had not been swept far by the water. Guided by the light, he found them after only a few steps. Now, he possessed 3 supply crates in total. Zhou Wen proceeded to open the new crate. Ding! Acquiring wood X10, stone X10, and soil, x10. These were all mere materials. Zhou gazed upon a chest brimming with these fundamental resources, feeling a tinge of disappointment. He was uncertain how to utilize these materials for at present. Food and water held paramount importance. With little to occupy his time, Zhou opened the global communication channel to peruse the exchanges among other survivors. Upon his exploration, he discerned a particular issue. The other survivors had not received additional treasure chests from the transformed Leviathan. The reason for this was that the Leviathan was engaged in a slow digestion process. The survivors, unable to hear the Leviathan's utterances, were oblivious to its state of digestion and therefore did not conceive the notion of aiding in this process. It seemed that my ability to comprehend the Leviathan's speech proved to be somewhat advantageous. While other survivors had procured only one supply box from a Leviathan, he had managed to obtain two. Moreover, his Leviathan remained active, suggesting the possibility of a third supply box. Thus, his rate of advancement would be thrice that of the other survivors. Naturally, Zhou would withhold the information regarding his assistance to the Leviathan and the resultant extra supply boxes from others. This was his unique advantage. In this enigmatic world, potential conflicts with fellow survivors loomed on the horizon, and maintaining a significant lead in progress was essential for his continued safety. One need not harm others, yet one must possess the ability to guard against them, Zhou pondered silently. After a while, the sound of surging seawater echoed once more at the entrance of the esophagus. Zhou promptly secured the supply box beside him, bracing for the oncoming rush of water. He pondered whether this time the sea would deliver sustenance for the Leviathan or simply the supply box itself. As the water receded with a splashing sound, Zhou eagerly shook his headlamp to inspect the surroundings. The absence of seaweed indicated that the Leviathan was not feeding this time. Thus, it must be the supply box. A surge of joy filled Zhou's heart as he began to search for it using the beam of light. Soon, he discovered a new supply box and, unable to contain his excitement, opened it without hesitation. Ding! You have obtained the blueprint for the algal oxygen production chamber. Upon hearing the notification in his mind, Zhou momentarily froze, only to be engulfed by a wave of exhilaration. The algal oxygen production chamber, as its name suggests, is designed to produce oxygen. Zhou had been troubled by the thought of whether he would need to assist the Leviathan in accelerating its digestion during its next feeding, especially since he had previously been on the brink of death due to oxygen deprivation. He was determined not to face such a perilous situation again. To his surprise, the third supply box yielded a blueprint for oxygen production. Zhou immediately utilized the blueprint, which transformed into a radiant blue light that integrated into the system interface, revealing a new section for blueprints. Upon opening this section, he found only one blueprint, that of the algal oxygen production chamber. Blueprint for algal oxygen production chamber requires 10 stones, seawater, and algae. Upon reviewing the blueprint for the required materials, Zhou's expression brightened even more. He possessed all the necessary items. 10 stones had already been extracted from the supply box, and as for seawater and algae, he merely needed to await the next feeding of the transmuted Leviathan to acquire them. I'm so fatigued, it's time for slumber. At that moment, the voice of a child resonated once more, and Zhou clearly discerned it, firmly establishing that he could indeed hear the voice of the transmuted Leviathan. As the vibrations within the gastric chamber ceased, it indicated that the Leviathan had also halted its activity and likely entered a phase of rest. Chapter 3. Algal Oxygenation Chamber. I'm hungry. It is time to seek sustenance. The child's voice echoed in Zhou's mind, jolting him from his slumber. Isolated within the gastric space, he could not ascertain whether it was day or night, so he adhered to the Leviathan's schedule. When it rested, he too would rest, ensuring their rhythms remained synchronized. Suddenly, the gastric walls trembled violently. The transmuted Leviathan had commenced its activity. Food and water were scarce. Having consumed a loaf of bread the previous day, Zhou awoke to the insistent growl of his stomach. Reluctantly, he devoured another loaf and drank half a bottle of mineral water. Now, only 2 loaves of bread and 3 bottles of water remained, a meager supply that filled him with unease. Should the subsequent supply boxes yield no food, he would find himself in dire peril. Zhou silently prayed for the next provisions to contain sustenance. After a time, the sound of surging seawater emanated from the direction of the esophagus. As a deluge of seawater surged in, Zhou having endured several waves of saline onslaught, had garnered experience in resisting the oncoming tide. Shielding the supply crate with his body to prevent it from being swept away, he directed the beam of his headlamp towards the bounty brought forth by the seawater. It was seaweed. Upon noticing the seaweed entwined within the brine, Zhou promptly accessed the system interface, unfolded the blueprint for the algae oxygenation chamber, and initiated the crafting process. In an instant, a radiant blue light illuminated the scene, causing the stones within the supply crate to levitate and arrange themselves, forming a stone trough measuring 1 meter in height and half a meter in width. Under the influence of the azure glow, seawater automatically flowed into the trough, accompanied by fragments of seaweed, which took root among the gravel at the bottom. The slender bodies of the seaweed swayed gently in the water. Was that all? The creation process was swift and rather rudimentary. Zhou harbored doubts about whether such a simplistic apparatus could genuinely generate oxygen, for, according to his knowledge, algae required sunlight for photosynthesis, and the gastric cavity he inhabited was devoid of any natural light. However, as he directed the light into the depths of the trough, his skepticism dissipated. Tiny bubbles had begun to materialize amidst the fronds of the seaweed, indicating the production of oxygen. It appeared that the apparatus was indeed capable of generating oxygen. A smile graced Zhou's face as he leaned over the trough, positioning his nostrils close to the surface where the bubbles ascended, greedily inhaling the air. Ah, the crisp aroma, the unmistakable scent of oxygen. Zhou's expression transformed into one of pure enjoyment. However, he felt nothing at all. It was merely a psychological effect. At that moment, the stomach wall had just been filled with seawater abundant in oxygen, while the oxygen produced by the algal oxygenation chamber was minimal. In such an oxygen-rich environment, no significant sensations were experienced. Soon, the seawater receded, revealing a plethora of seagrass. This time, Zhou was wise. He no longer waited for the transformation of the Leviathan to finish its meal before moving the seagrass to the digestion pool. Instead, as soon as the seawater withdrew, he began to gather the seagrass. The amount of food required for the Leviathan in a single day occupied 2/3 of the stomach wall space, necessitating several feeding sessions, each introducing fresh oxygen into the stomach. Thus, as long as he acted swiftly, he would not find himself in a state of oxygen deprivation as he had the day before. Although there was now an oxygen-producing device, it remained uncertain whether the oxygen generated would suffice for his personal respiration. To ensure absolute safety, Zhou devised a plan. This strategy carried certain risks, as the Leviathan would soon consume the seagrass multiple times, and Zhou would endure several waves of seawater. If he were not careful and were swept into the digestion pool, it would spell disaster. Therefore, Zhou's movements had to be rapid, and he had to remain vigilant. Listening for the sound of the incoming seawater, at the first hint of it, he would immediately distance himself from the digestion pool. Zhou began to dash back and forth. Fortunately, prior to his arrival in this realm, he had maintained a daily running routine, so his stamina was adequate. After making numerous round trips, he finally succeeded in tossing all the seagrass into the digestion pool. Phew! Zhou lay prone atop the algae oxygenation chamber, inhaling deeply. Due to the scarcity of seagrass, the oxygen within the confines of his stomach was still ample. After a period of vigorous breathing, the rhythm of his lung contractions began to steady. After some time, the Leviathan of transformation resumed its feeding, and Zhou, having rested sufficiently, commenced the arduous task of transporting the seagrass once more. The Leviathan fed a total of 5 times, with brief intervals in between. Zhou found himself somewhat fatigued, tirelessly running back and forth, his strength waning. By the time the Leviathan completed its feeding phase and entered a state of digestion, approximately 1/5 of the seagrass remained untransported. However, Zhou felt no urgency, for he had made considerable progress compared to the previous day. Yesterday, he had commenced his labor only after the Leviathan had begun digesting. Today, he had started transporting the seagrass as soon as the Leviathan commenced feeding, leaving just a fraction to be moved. Once his strength was replenished, he would swiftly complete the task. Furthermore, he had altered his strategy for moving the seagrass, and the oxygen in the stomach's confines remained abundant. There was no need for haste. After resting, Zhou prepared to finish transporting the remaining seagrass, but an unexpected incident occurred. As he reached into the pile of seagrass to grasp a handful, something within the mass grazed his arm, followed by a sharp pang of pain. Startled, Zhou immediately withdrew his hand. The light illuminated his arm, revealing a crimson gash nearly 5 centimeters long, from which blood oozed, trickling down his forearm to his palm. And droplets fell from his little finger. What was that? Zhou clutched his wound and hurriedly distanced himself from the pile of seagrass. In the next moment, the seagrass swayed slightly, and a creature leaped forth from the tangle. Zhou's heart raced with trepidation, prompting him to retreat several steps. Fearful that some unknown entity lurked within the seagrass, poised to launch an attack. This realm was inherently a world of mystery, and the metamorphic leviathan that coexisted with him had emerged at a staggering 30 meters in length, underscoring the extraordinary nature of this environment. It was evident that other beings inhabiting this aquatic world would not be ordinary either. Zhou dared not approach recklessly. He removed his headlamp and began to hand crank it, ensuring a steady illumination to ward off any potential ambush from the shadows. The rhythmic sound of carapaces striking flesh echoed within the cavernous space of his stomach. After the unknown creature had emerged from the seagrass, it seemed to bounce in place, showing no inclination to advance towards Zhou. The beam of the headlamp reached only 2 or 3 meters ahead, failing to illuminate the creature's form. After a brief period of waiting, Zhou resolved to muster his courage and draw nearer. It was not a deliberate act of recklessness. Rather, his injured arm had been bleeding profusely, necessitating urgent attention to staunch the flow. Yet, with the specter of the unknown creature nearby, he could not afford to divide his focus on bandaging his wound. Holding his breath, Zhou cautiously edged closer, the light from his headlamp sweeping the area 2 to 3 meters ahead. At last, he beheld the visage of the enigmatic creature. It was shrimp. However, this shrimp was of an extraordinarily large size, akin to the forearm of an adult. Its entire body of vibrant red, with its head adorned by a dagger-like protrusion. The wound on Zhou's arm had indeed been inflicted by that very spike. Upon discovering that it was merely a large shrimp, Zhou's apprehension significantly diminished. Although the shrimp was sizable, it exhibited no aggression, merely bouncing in place. As fear subsided, it was swiftly replaced by anger. While he was peacefully clutching the seaweed, the shrimp had inflicted a deep gash along his arm. Lacking any medical supplies, the likelihood of infection loomed ominously, threatening his very life. Curse it, Zhou's frustration escalated, prompting him to seize a nearby supply crate and hurl it at the shrimp. However, the impact proved minimal. The soft ground and the shrimp's robust shell absorbed the force, rendering his efforts futile. After several fruitless strikes, his irritation peaked, and he kicked the shrimp away to avoid its sharp spines. Determined not to squander further time on the creature, Zhou tore a strip from his undergarment to bandage the wound and staunch the bleeding. Once he had tended to his injury, he resumed collecting the seaweed, but not without first giving it a cautious kick with a shod foot, ensuring no hidden shrimp lurked within that might inflict further harm. After a quarter of an hour, he successfully gathered all remaining seaweed without encountering another shrimp. With the crucial task completed, he now awaited the Leviathan's transformation to commence. Before the Leviathan could act, Zhou resolved to eliminate the shrimp that had caused him injury. Indeed, Zhou contemplated the notion of directly propelling the large shrimp into the digestive pool with a kick. However, he felt a pang of reluctance towards the creature's resilient shell and its sharp, dagger-like spines adorning its head. The shrimp, already considerable in size, comparable to an adult's forearm, possessed a shell that, if entirely removed, would perfectly serve as a protective covering for his own arm, providing a degree of defense against any aggressive entities he might encounter in the future. Furthermore, the spines atop the shrimp's head could be fashioned into a knife, proving useful for cutting tasks. After a brief contemplation on methods to subdue the shrimp, Zhou sprang into action. He first opened the lid of an empty supply box and deftly positioned the box over the shrimp, thereby restricting its movements. Next, he tore a strip of fabric from his clothing and secured it around the shrimp's body, completing his preparations for the impending act of termination. The shrimp continued to flail about, blissfully unaware of its imminent demise. Grasping the other end of the fabric strip, Zhou began to rotate his body. Under the influence of centrifugal force, the shrimp, bound at the end of the strip, began to spin as well. When the force became sufficiently potent, Zhou forcefully hurled the shrimp towards the algal oxygenation chamber. With a resounding thud, the shell collided with the stone, producing a sharp, clear sound that echoed the shattering of its exoskeleton. Elated, Zhou halted his actions to ascertain whether the shrimp had succumbed. To his surprise, the resilient creature remained alive. Though its shell was marred by numerous fissures, and given the violent impact, it was not far from death. Undeterred, Zhou persisted, swinging the shrimp once more, and subjecting it to a series of collisions with the algal oxygenation chamber. At last, the shrimp succumbed to its injuries. However, the task of peeling the shrimp shell posed a challenge for Zhou, as he lacked any proper tools for cutting. He pondered the sharp spikes at the head of the shrimp, placing the shrimp's body on the supply box. Zhou secured it with one foot while pressing down on the spike with the other, exerting force until the 7 or 8 centimeters long spike snapped. Armed with the broken spike, he began to carve into the shrimp, but the shell on its back proved too tough to penetrate. Thus, he resolved to start from the softer underside at the tail. The process of peeling the shrimp was far from easy, although the spike served as a makeshift cutting instrument. It was hardly a knife. After a laborious half-hour, he finally managed to remove the shell from the shrimp's tail. Finally done, he exhaled a sigh of relief, collapsing onto the ground, clutching the ragged shrimp shell. While it was not particularly aesthetically pleasing, it would serve its purpose. Wrapping the shell around his forearm, it fit snugly, though the cracks from the shrimp's collision rendered it rather tattered. Nonetheless, it offered a degree of protection. Now, only the shrimp head and tail meat remained. Zhou gazed at the translucent shrimp flesh, swallowing hard. If only there were a fire. He had no inclination to consume raw meat, especially that of an unknown creature from this strange world, which only heightened his reluctance. But could he ignite a fire here? He surveyed the space within his stomach wall and shook his head. Even if he possessed the means to create a flame, it would be futile, for the oxygen within the stomach was insufficient to sustain a fire, unless he wished to suffocate. At this moment, the metamorphosed leviathan, having completed its digestion, began to stir. Zhou placed the remaining shrimp heads and flesh into the now empty supply box to prevent them from being washed away by the sea. He cast a glance at the makeshift bandage on his arm, where blood had begun to seep through the cloth. He realized that such a rudimentary treatment was insufficient. Thus, he opened the system interface and accessed the global trading channel, searching for medical supplies that could staunch the bleeding. 10 units of wood for 1 loaf of bread. I am out of food. I implore the affluent individuals to exchange some sustenance. 10 units of stone for 1 bottle of mineral water. I accidentally let my initial 3 bottles of mineral water be swept into the digestion pool, and I have not had a sip in a day. If the exchange materials are inadequate, feel free to message me privately. Zhou quickly perused the listings, noting that most were exchanges of materials for food, clearly indicating that the majority had initially opened supply boxes filled with raw materials. After further searching, he finally discovered a listing for medical supplies. 1 medical bandage for 3 loaves of bread. Medical supplies are indeed life-saving commodities. First come, first served. 3 loaves of bread seemed excessively steep. Zhou frowned, yet his arm was already beginning to ooze blood, and this was the only medical item capable of halting the bleeding. He had no choice but to proceed with the exchange. However, he currently possessed only 2 loaves of bread, insufficient for the transaction. Therefore, he clicked on the trader's avatar, resolved to negotiate. My friend, your medical bandage is priced too high at 3 loaves of bread. Would 1 suffice? Before long, a response arrived from the other side. This is absolutely essential. It's a life-saving item. Just take a look at the trading channel. There are other medical supplies available. What is the matter, my friend? Are you injured? Not all. In the belly of the phantasmic leviathan, it's almost impossible to get hurt. However, I possess a strong sense of crisis, which compels me to prepare in advance. Upon seeing medical supplies in the trading channel, I thought it prudent to stock up ahead of time. Zhou refrained from disclosing his injury, fearing that the other party might exploit the situation for profit. That makes sense. You have a valid point. I shall refrain from trading the medical bandages and keep them for emergencies. Thank you for the reminder. Upon reading this message, Zhou felt a pang of urgency. His arm wound needed immediate attention. Otherwise, the bleeding alone could prove fatal before any infection set in. Please, my friend, how about 2 loaves of bread? Huh, you are indeed injured, aren't you? Cursed be his perceptiveness. Yet, upon reflection, it was evident. Today was only the 2nd day, and most individuals were trading food, while he alone sought medical supplies, which spoke volumes. 2 loaves of bread and a bottle of mineral water. This is all the sustenance I have left. If you refuse to trade, I'm left with no options. Zhou Wen's message was resolute. Indeed, it constituted his entire food supply. He was left with merely 2 bottles of mineral water, and if the 3 supply crates of the day yielded no food, he would be reduced to living on water alone. Chapter 5. The small planting box. Oh dear, my friend, don't assume the worst of people. I would never take advantage of you. Zhou Wen remained silent, awaiting the other party's next response. How about this? A loaf of bread and a bottle of mineral water in exchange. Upon reading this message, Zhou Wen felt a surge of joy, only to be followed by a sense of skepticism. Had he truly encountered a benevolent soul, or had he merely underestimated the inherent goodness in people? He had always believed that in such an unpredictable world, particularly amidst a scarcity of resources, individuals tended to lean towards selfishness. Survival often necessitated such inclinations. Upon reviewing the trade proposal once more, he confirmed that it indeed involved a loaf of bread and a bottle of water. Without hesitation, Zhou Wen accepted the exchange. The items within his supply box shimmered with a blue light, and as the luminescence faded, a roll of medical gauze appeared in its stead. Zhou Wen promptly seized the gauze, unwrapping the cloth binding his wound. With half a bottle of mineral water, he endured the pain to cleanse the injury before applying the medical bandage, successfully staunching the flow of blood. At that moment, a notification from the system emerged, revealing a private message. Hey there, brother. I see you received the gauze. I hope it proves useful. Thank you, Zhou Wen replied, grateful that the other party had not attempted to exploit the situation, making his gratitude well-deserved. Haha, it's a fair trade. No need for thanks. Brother. Since I have not taken advantage of you, may I inquire how you sustained your injuries? Zhou Wen recognized the shrewdness in this person. A subtle smile graced his lips as he noted the intent behind the inquiry. Clearly, the individual sought to collect a favor in exchange for the information regarding his wounds. Indeed, Zhou Wen's earlier assertions were not unfounded. Within the gastric cavity of a leviathan, surrounded by soft, fleshy walls, sustaining injury proved to be quite challenging. The reason for Zhou Wen's injury was, of course, a significant revelation. He did not conceal this information and disclose the matter of the large shrimp to the other party. However, he modified certain aspects of the narrative, omitting the part where he transported seaweed to expedite the leviathan's digestion. When a leviathan consumed the seaweed, a supply crate was inadvertently swept away by the ocean currents, prompting him to search through the pile of seaweed for the crate. To his surprise, he discovered a shrimp, approximately the size of an adult forearm, concealed within the seaweed, which left a cut on his calf due to the sharp spines of the creature. Shrimp the size of an adult forearm. It seems the creatures in this world are quite large, he mused. Indeed, do exercise caution in the future. While the shrimp may not exhibit aggression, encountering it unawares amidst the seaweed can still be perilous, Zhou Wen advised. Although the other party sought his information, he had also conserved food, thus deeming it a fair exchange. Thank you for the warning. I shall be careful. Perhaps we can maintain regular contact and assist each other moving forward? That sounds agreeable. As their conversation came to a close, the sound of rushing seawater echoed from the esophagus. Zhou Wen promptly relocated the algae oxygenator next to the esophageal diaphragm, where it would be least affected by the turbulent waters. He then placed all 4 supply crates atop the algae oxygenator, ensuring they remained just above the water level, thus eliminating the need to secure the crates with his body each time. This time, the incoming seawater brought forth a new supply crate, which he opened with anticipation. Ding! Obtained 10 stones, 10 dirt, and 10 hay. Why are they all materials? I just want food, Zhou Wen complained. He was left with only a loaf of bread, and without more food, he would inevitably face hunger. After a while, the illusory leviathan devoured the second supply crate. Ding! Obtained the blueprint for a small planting box. A planting box. Zhou Wen was utterly delighted. With a planting box, he could cultivate food, alleviating his concerns about sustenance. He immediately utilized the blueprint for the small planting box, which transformed into a beam of blue light and entered the blueprint section of his system interface. Materials required for constructing the small planting box: 10 wood, 10 dirt. With all materials on hand, he declared, "Construct." Yet, nothing happened. What was going on? Why was there no response when he had enough materials? Zhou Wen, perplexed, stared at the ample supplies in the crate, unwilling to accept defeat. He clicked on Construct once more, but still no reaction. What was the issue? He pondered various solutions, moving the materials out of the crate and arranging them to mirror the design depicted in the planting box blueprint. Yet construction remained impossible. Was this some kind of joke? Wen's frustration mounted. They provided him with a blueprint for a planting box, but disallowed construction. What did this mean? Ultimately, he resigned to his fate. The dream of self-sufficient food cultivation shattered. Wen then opened the trading section, perusing the trade information within. This is already the second supply box of the day. If the final supply box yields no food, he will have to exchange materials for a loaf of bread in the trading channel. Watermelon seeds for 1 loaf of bread? Upon seeing this trade information, Wen immediately thought of his small planting box. Once he constructs the planting box, he will need crop seeds for cultivation. Trading a single watermelon seed for a loaf of bread seems quite advantageous. However, Wen refrained from trading. He had only 1 piece of bread left. If he traded it away, he would have nothing to eat, and with the daily task of collecting seaweed, his energy consumption was significant. That last piece of bread would barely sustain him until tomorrow. Otherwise, his body simply could not endure. For an average person, 1 loaf of bread per day is far from sufficient. For the past 2 days, he had been in a state of hunger, as food was exceedingly scarce, leaving him with no options. This scarcity was precisely why Wen yearned to build the small planting box. The sensation of hunger was truly unbearable. A few hours later, the final supply box was washed ashore by the sea. Once the water receded, Wen hurriedly carried the supply box beside the oxygen-producing algae tank. "Please grant me food." He placed his hand on the lid of the supply box and silently prayed. Ding! Obtained 1 apple, obtained 1 banana. Well, it is indeed food, but it does little to quell his hunger. Having only just arrived in this world 2 days prior, his craving for fruit was not particularly intense. He was far more hopeful for bread. No, just because I do not desire fruit does not mean others do not. Perhaps I should try placing it on the trading platform. Contemplating, Wen placed 2 fruits on the trading channel, exchanging them for 2 loaves of bread. Before long, the transaction was completed, and he successfully obtained 2 loaves in return for the fruits. It seemed that there were quite a few people who possessed an abundance of food. Wen mused softly. Now, he had 3 loaves of bread and a bottle and a half of water, barely sufficient to sustain him until the day after tomorrow. Alas! Fatigue washed over him, and he decided to sleep. The voice of the illusory Leviathan resonated. Upon hearing it, Wen prepared for slumber, yet he found himself drenched, with remnants of water still lingering on the ground, rendering sleep quite uncomfortable, especially since his injured arm could not come into contact with water. After a moment of contemplation, Wen directed his gaze toward the supply boxes stacked atop the algae oxygenation tank. A few minutes later, he arranged 7 supply boxes in pairs on the floor. Stripping off his clothes, he lay down on the slightly drier boxes. How delightful! Chapter 6. Spiny krill. The stomach wall began to tremble violently, signaling the awakening of the illusory Leviathan, and Wen roused from his slumber, having dreamt of a feast. Sitting up from his makeshift bed of supply boxes, he instinctively licked his lips at the thought of the food from his dream. He wondered if there were any items within the boxes that could be used to heat the food. Wen immediately recalled the shrimp from yesterday. Yet he had no means to cook it. It was simply too unpalatable to consume raw. He managed to eat a loaf of bread and drink the remaining half bottle of mineral water, which had been saved for washing his wound, as a meager attempt to alleviate his hunger. After examining the injury on his arm, he pondered whether the efficacy of the medical tourniquet or his robust constitution was to credit, for the wound showed no signs of infection, which was, in a sense, a fortunate turn amidst misfortune. After re-bandaging the wound, he meticulously stacked all the supplies scattered on the ground atop the algae oxygenation tank, now left with the task of awaiting the Leviathan's feeding. During this interval, he opened the global communication channel to peruse the exchanges among other survivors. Esteemed ones, I have run out of food. All I possess now is a watermelon seed. Could you possibly assist me in exchange for a loaf of bread? What use is a watermelon seed? I have no idea how to plant it right now. And you expect to trade it for bread? Your expectations seem rather lofty. Stop calling out, my friend. You've been at it since yesterday. Currently, each person receives but 1 supply box daily. The acquisition of food is purely a matter of luck. From the trading channel's information, one can deduce that the majority are experiencing severe food shortages. Who would willingly trade food for a completely useless watermelon seed? I implore you, I have not eaten for a day. I will exchange anything edible. Isn't there a chance to obtain a supply box today? Perhaps you could wait a little longer. That won't be until 5 or 6 hours from now. and I am utterly drained of energy. It was indeed he who had attempted to trade a watermelon seed for bread on the trading channel yesterday. Upon seeing the other S message, Zhou contemplated briefly and promptly clicked on the individual's avatar to send a private message. The response came swiftly. Are you seeking to exchange a watermelon seed? Yes, but not for bread. It matters not, as long as it is edible. What precisely is it? Raw shrimp meat. Shrimp? Where did you procure such a delicacy? The other party appeared quite astonished, prompting Zhou to briefly recount the tale of how he acquired the shrimp. Shrimp the size of an adult forearm must weigh at least 3 or 4 pounds. Indeed, approximately that. I am unaccustomed to consuming raw meat, and since it would spoil in a few days, I thought it prudent to exchange it for watermelon seeds instead. However, I must caution you that in this unknown realm, the shrimp may be toxic. Are you certain you wish to proceed with the exchange? After a lengthy pause, the other party finally replied, let us proceed. I currently possess no other food nor items for barter. I shall take my chances with the shrimp. Moments later, the individual sent the watermelon seeds directly through a private message. Upon confirming the seeds were indeed for watermelon, Zhou promptly sent over the shrimp meat. To an outsider's perspective, trading a substantial amount of shrimp for a mere watermelon seed seemed rather unwise, especially since the seeds could not currently be cultivated. Yet for Zhou, who had already acquired a small planting box, this transaction was akin to placing a piece in a puzzle. Seeds are an indispensable part of self-sustenance. Furthermore, as he had no use for the raw shrimp, unaware of its potential toxicity, he considered the exchange advantageous. After some time, the Leviathan began to feed, and Zhou resumed his task of transporting seaweed, just as he had the previous day. Due to an attack by large shrimp hidden among the seaweed yesterday, I adorned my forearm with shrimp shells today. I meticulously hollowed out the interiors of the shrimp heads and wrapped them around my palm. Before embarking on the task of transporting the seaweed, I cautiously used my shell-clad hand to sift through the vegetation, ensuring no creatures were concealed within, before commencing the transfer. The shrimp shells indeed provided a protective barrier, as I discovered 3 large shrimp lurking within the pile of seaweed. One was spotted early by Zhou, while the other 2 launched an assault against him. However, the shells on his arm successfully shielded him from harm. Once the seaweed had been transported, Zhou proceeded to handle the 3 large shrimp, opting for a different method than the one he employed yesterday, which had been too damaging to the shells and a last resort. Today, equipped with the sharp spines from the shrimp heads as tools, he could employ a technique that would not compromise the integrity of the shells. He first secured the shrimp in an empty supply box, then pierced the fragile junction between the head and tail with the spines. This area is arguably the most vulnerable part of the shrimp's anatomy. By slicing through the thin shell at this juncture and forcefully prying apart the gap with his hands, he successfully separated the head from the tail, preserving the shell intact. After approximately half an hour, all 3 large shrimp had been expertly processed. With the experience of peeling shrimp shells from the previous day, today's shells remained largely unscathed, an improvement over yesterday's efforts. With nothing else to attend to, he stored the shrimp meat and shells in the supply box, awaiting the Leviathan's transformation to devour the container. Once the Leviathan finished digesting, it began to move, and shortly thereafter, the first supply box, accompanied by seawater, entered its gastric chamber. Ding! Acquired a tin of yellow peach X1. Is there really canned yellow peach? This is quite delightful. It is rich in sugar and can provide ample energy. Zhou happily stored the supply box, realizing that the canned peaches not only contained edible fruit, but also sweet syrup to drink, making it a veritable lifeline in this world. While Zhou awaited the arrival of the second supply box, Jiang Haitao sent him a message. Brother, do you still have that spiny shrimp meat? Spiny shrimp meat? Zhou momentarily paused, then swiftly recalled it was the large shrimp meat he had traded to Jiang Haitao. How do you know that the large shrimp is called spiny shrimp? Zhou inquired, somewhat puzzled. It's in the illustrated guide. I stumbled upon it by chance. Illustrated guide? Zhou immediately opened the guide to discover a second page had indeed appeared. Spiny shrimp, length, 30 to 40 centimeters weight, 5 to 6 kilograms food type. Algae description. The sharp spines on its head are exceptionally dangerous. The flesh is delicious and elastic, and the shell can be used to craft armor. The guide's description of the spiny shrimp was succinct, yet it provided Zhou with valuable information. No wonder they always hide among the seagrass. Their diet consists of algae. The Leviathan's food also comprises algae, and when it swallows, It may inadvertently engulf a few unfortunate spiny shrimps. But why has no one else encountered them? This question suddenly arose in Zhou Wen's mind. After some contemplation, he considered a possibility. Could it be that my constant assistance in expediting the digestion of the transformed Leviathan has led it to engage in activities far exceeding those of its counterparts, thus venturing into waters inhabited by the spiny krill? Zhou Wen pondered. This seems to be the case. It appears I have significantly outpaced others. Yet, this revelation did not bring Zhou Wen joy. Rather, it instilled a sense of apprehension. As the transformed Leviathan strays further from its birthplace, the array of marine creatures it encounters will only grow. Should it inadvertently swallow a marine organism measuring 3 to 4 meters, it could spell disaster. Brother, are you still there? Yes, I was just perusing the compendium. The spiny krill meat is quite a delicacy. Consuming it can enhance one's strength. Therefore, I wish to trade for another piece of spiny krill meat using the blueprint I had just acquired from the supply crate. What? Chapter 7, Strength 1. Zhou Wen was taken aback by Jiang Haitao's message. The spiny krill meat, which he had always been reluctant to consume, could actually augment his physical attributes, particularly the crucial aspect of strength. Upon receiving this information, Zhou Wen's gaze shifted to the supply crate containing the spiny krill meat. He resolved against trading it. Consuming the 3 pieces would grant him an increase of 3 points in strength, thereby allowing him to reach the level of an average person. In the coming days, spiny krill would likely remain available, and his strength would continue to grow exponentially, rendering him an invincible entity. However, it did not take long for Zhou Wen to dismiss his absurd notion. Although the spiny shrimp posed a certain degree of danger, with adequate precautions, eliminating it would be rather straightforward. If one could indeed amplify their strength indefinitely, it would imply that they had become invincible without even leaving the novice village. A notion that is evidently illogical. Thus, Zhou Wen surmised that the enhancement provided by the spiny shrimp meat must be limited. To validate his hypothesis, he resolved to trade a piece of spiny shrimp meat with Jiang Haitao. What blueprint did you acquire? It's a blueprint for armor called the spiny helmet, seemingly crafted from the shell of the spiny shrimp. What a fortuitous coincidence. This was indeed a perfect match. With the opportunity to obtain an armor blueprint presented before him, Zhou Wen readily agreed to the trade. Once you consume this spiny shrimp meat, let me know if you can still enhance your strength, he instructed. Sure thing, big brother. I'll eat it shortly and inform you afterward. By the way, what is your name? I forgot to ask earlier. After Zhou Wen disclosed his name to Jiang Haitao, their conversation came to an end. He then proceeded to utilize the armor blueprint he had just traded for. Materials required for spiny helmet. Complete spiny shrimp shells, X3. Cloth pieces, X5. He had just enough shrimp shells, but unfortunately lacked the necessary cloth pieces. Zhou Wen decided to wait for the remaining 2 supply chests. If neither contained cloth pieces, he would venture into the trading channel to acquire 5. He was also eager to sample the spiny shrimp meat himself. Zhou Wen retrieved a piece from the supply chest housing the spiny shrimp meat. The spiny shrimp meat has the ability to enhance strength, regardless of whether it is raw or not, and I devoured it eagerly. To my surprise, the flavor was quite delightful. The flesh of the spiny shrimp is firm and tender, devoid of any fishy taste, and it carries a subtle sweetness. However, I found myself unaccustomed to consuming raw meat, as the texture felt somewhat peculiar. After finishing an entire shrimp, I felt a bit overstuffed. It was the only satisfying meal I had in 3 days. Ding! Consuming spiny shrimp meat grants 1 strength. Upon hearing the system's notification, I swiftly opened my physical attribute panel. Zhou Wen, normal human attributes. 10 intelligence, 10 strength, 8 speed, 11 constitution, 9 evaluation, a relatively healthy individual. Indeed, my strength had increased slightly. I moved my arms and noticed that although my muscles felt a tad firmer, the change was not particularly pronounced. The boost to my strength was minimal, hence the imperceptible sensation. Having already consumed 1 spiny shrimp to the point of fullness, I resolved to save the remaining 1 for tomorrow. After a couple of hours, the second supply crate arrived, accompanied by the rush of seawater into the stomach space. Ding! Acquired stones, X10, wood X10, cloth pieces, X10. Cloth pieces had arrived. I immediately accessed the schematic for the spiny helmet and clicked to craft. 3 spiny shrimp shells and 5 cloth pieces transformed into a radiant blue light, and soon, A helmet encased in an outer shell with 3 protruding spikes emerged in my hands. He placed the helmet atop his head, its size fitting perfectly. Inside, a layer of soft fabric cushioned against the hard shell, providing a comfortable fit that did not press uncomfortably against his scalp. Indeed, it was quite suitable. Zhou carefully removed the helmet and set it atop a pile of supply boxes in the corner, ensuring it would not be dampened by seawater, as he intended to use it for gathering grass the following day. At that moment, Jiang Haitao sent a message. Brother Wen, I consumed the spiny shrimp meat, but unfortunately, I did not gain any strength points this time. It appears that the spiny shrimp meat only grants strength attributes upon the first consumption. Subsequent servings yield no benefit. Indeed, that seems to be the case. Brother Wen, the blueprints I traded with you earlier are rather rare. Would it be possible to exchange another spiny shrimp meat? I feel somewhat at a disadvantage. Previously, Jiang Haitao was willing to trade the blueprint for the spiny shrimp meat, believing that it would enhance his strength further, thus deeming the exchange fair. However, upon realizing that consuming the spiny shrimp meat a second time would not yield any strength points, he felt the transaction was exceedingly unbalanced. The dilemma lay in the fact that he had initiated the trade, and now to request an additional item felt somewhat shameless. Particularly, his supply box had yielded only blueprints today, leaving him without any food reserves, which caused him considerable anxiety. I only have 2 today. I traded 1 with you and consumed the other myself. Tomorrow, if I find more, I will give you 1. Zhou did not dwell on the matter too much. Indeed, a piece of armor blueprint held greater value than a single spiny shrimp meat, making Jiang Haitao's request quite reasonable. However, Zhou could not ascertain the veracity of Jiang Haitao's claims. What if he consumed a second portion of the spiny shrimp meat and still managed to augment his strength points, thereby misleading him? This possibility lingered in his mind. Therefore, he resolved to reserve the remaining portion of the spiny shrimp meat until the following day, consuming it only after confirming that he could no longer enhance his strength points. Only then would he consider trading the newly acquired spiny shrimp meat with Jiang Haitao. The sound of surging seawater echoed from his esophagus as the final supply crate of the day arrived. Ding! Obtained heating pack X1. A heating pack. This suggested that perhaps he could cook the spiny shrimp meat tomorrow. The mere thought of indulging in cooked food filled Zhou with unbridled joy. Coincidentally, he had also discovered a tin of canned yellow peaches today. Once the peaches were consumed, the tin would serve as an ideal vessel for cooking. At the moment Zhou laid eyes on the heating pack, the subsequent items he would require materialized in his mind. Yet, as this thought crossed his mind, he quickly dismissed the idea of consuming cooked food. No, the heating pack could only be used once, and the only available item to cook was the spiny shrimp meat. Such a waste it would be. Zhou felt this was far too simplistic. With only one opportunity at hand, it certainly warranted a more extravagant approach. Furthermore, the canned peaches were meant to be preserved to serve as sustenance in times of deprivation. To merely boil the shrimp meat in water and consume, it would be an egregious squandering. In that moment, Zhou, a seasoned player of survival games, experienced an overwhelming surge of his inner hoarder mentality. He resolved to retain all the good things, saving them for the most critical moments. Place the heating packs and canned yellow peaches in a supply box, as both items are currently exceedingly precious. They must be carefully positioned at a height, ensuring they do not become submerged in water. Chapter 8. Shadows in the water. On the 4th day in this world, the illusory Leviathan commenced its activities, and Zhou awakened from his slumber. The first thing he did upon waking was consume the remaining portion of spiky krill meat for breakfast. Jiang Haitao had not deceived him. It was indeed impossible to augment his strength further. Zhou felt a twinge of disappointment, as he had hoped to elevate his power to at least 10 points, reaching a level comparable to that of an ordinary person. After a while, it was nearly time for the illusory Leviathan to feed. Zhou donned the spiky helmet he had crafted the day prior and positioned himself in the corner where the supply boxes were stacked, anticipating the transport of seaweed. At that moment, unexpectedly, he heard the babyish voice of the illusory Leviathan. How annoying. It's all this creature stealing my food. From the tone of this statement, it was evident that the illusory Leviathan was irate, seemingly encountering some creature that was competing with it for sustenance. Could be the spiky krill? Zhou speculated, recalling from the illustrated guide that spiky krill also fed on algae, and the seaweed that the illusory Leviathan had been consuming for days belonged to the same category. It appeared that today, there would be a significant number of spiky krill mingled within the seaweed, necessitating caution during the transportation. In the previous days, the seaweed had also contained spiky krill, yet the illusory leviathan had not expressed itself in such a manner, suggesting that the quantity of spiky krill had not been substantial. Today, however, it seemed that their numbers were significant enough to interfere with the feeding of the illusory leviathan. Suddenly, without warning, the entire cavity of the stomach began to tremble violently, causing the space to tilt precariously. The area near the digestive pool surged upward abruptly, and the entire stomach compartment nearly stood upright. Zhou was caught off guard and tumbled to the side, crashing against the soft flesh wall. Fortunately, the wall was yielding, and aside from feeling slightly dizzy from the jolt, he emerged unscathed. However, the oxygen-producing algae tank positioned nearby was not so fortunate. The tilt of the stomach caused seawater to spill out. Additionally, the 10 supply boxes he had accumulated over the past few days were now scattered haphazardly around him. Zhou lunged towards one of the supply boxes, which contained the precious canned peaches and heat packs he had obtained the previous day. These invaluable items could not be compromised. What was happening? Clutching the supply box tightly, Zhou's mind raced with confusion and alarm. Had the transformed Leviathan come under attack from other creatures? His thoughts instinctively veered towards ominous possibilities. This world was a realm of uncertainty for Zhou, even after several days. He remained oblivious to the nature of the outside world, and such ambiguity breeds fear. Although the transformed Leviathan was a formidable 30 meters in length, an entity that would dominate the oceans on Earth, this was not Earth. The Leviathan had only recently been born, and it was entirely possible it might encounter even larger beings that could pose a threat. Suddenly, a thunderous explosion reverberated through the Leviathan's body, penetrating the stomach cavity with a sound akin to rolling thunder. The sound was deafening, powerful waves of sound resonating throughout Zhou's entire body, causing his internal organs to vibrate. While his head felt as though it had been struck with tremendous force, a splitting headache ensued. Fortunately, this cacophony was but a fleeting moment, abruptly loud and then swiftly dissipating. Trying to steal my food? A single swipe of the tail sent it all flying. The voice of the Leviathan manifested at that instant, and in that moment of dizziness, Zhou comprehended the source of the earlier disturbance. Goodness! It turned out to be merely the act of capturing shrimp. This revelation eased Zhou's anxious heart. As long as it was not an assault from another colossal fish, he could breathe a sigh of relief. The commotion had been overwhelming, almost sending me away. His stomach space had now returned to normal, and Zhou sat on the ground, offering a wry smile as he spoke. After resting for a brief, while feeling less dazed, Zhou propped up the algae oxygen chamber that had fallen to the ground. The seawater within was nearly depleted, yet this posed little concern, for soon the Leviathan would need to feed, and replenishing the seawater would be simple enough. The scattered supply crates were collected one by Zhou, who neatly arranged them atop the algae oxygen chamber, placing the most precious crate at the highest point. The familiar sound of surging seawater emanated from the esophagus, signaling the Leviathan's commencement of feeding. As seawater flooded into the stomach cavity, Zhou promptly accessed the system interface, locating the blueprint for the algae oxygen chamber. With a click on the repair option, seawater automatically filled the stone chamber, and the restoration was completed swiftly. Once the seawater receded, Zhou commenced his task of transporting seaweed for the day. During the process of transporting, Zhou exercised utmost caution, continuously sifting through the pile of seaweed with his shrimp shell-clad arms. Only after confirming the absence of spiny shrimp within the heap did he lift it to carry it to the digestion pool. What was that? A spiny shrimp? As Zhou rummaged through the seaweed, he encountered a hard object, a sensation he recognized as the touch of a spiny shrimp's shell. However, upon contact, this spiny shrimp did not flick its tail. It lay motionless among the seaweed. Clearing away the foliage, the beam of his headlamp revealed, indeed, a spiny shrimp. But it was evidently lifeless, its head spike broken, its shell shattered, and the flesh exposed. Today, I should be able to collect numerous dead shrimp. Zhou mused cheerfully to himself. Just moments ago, the sound of a Leviathan's tail thrashing nearly startled him to death, the force of which was unimaginable. The spiny shrimp that endured that strike must have suffered greatly, with many likely crushed or stunned. With the Leviathan feasting nearby, the seaweed was surely interspersed with a multitude of dead shrimp. Although spiny shrimp could not regenerate power points, Zhou could trade them for rare items. Thus, Zhou began merrily transporting the seaweed while collecting the deceased spiny shrimp. After completing the first round of seaweed transport, he had amassed a total of 13 dead spiny shrimp and 2 barely alive ones. Wow, this is just the first round of feeding, and I've already gathered 15 spiny shrimp. By the end of the feeding, there could easily be 70 or 80. Zhou exclaimed in delight as he gazed at the gathered spiny shrimp. However, with everything piled up like this, during the second round of feeding, the sea water might wash it all away. Zhou began to ponder the issue of storage and turned his gaze towards the algae oxygenation tank tucked away in the corner. Perhaps he could construct another algae oxygenation tank. Zhou envisioned positioning 2 algae oxygenation tanks in a V-shape against the wall of the stomach, creating a triangular space in the middle where he could store the spiny shrimp. After all, there was an abundance of materials, and adding another oxygen-producing device could only be beneficial. Soon, the second round of feeding commenced. Zhou carefully arranged the spiny shrimp in the corner, using his body to shield them from the oncoming waves, protecting the 15 spiny shrimp. He then unfurled the blueprints for the algae oxygenation tank and began constructing the second one. The 2 algae oxygenation tanks were arranged as planned in a V-shape, perfectly encircling the 15 spiny shrimp and blocking the force of the seawater. All right, the spiny shrimp harvested later can be temporarily stored here, Zhou said with a sense of joy. Just then, out of the corner of his eye, he suddenly spotted a dark shadow in the water. Zhou's heart raced, and he immediately directed the light towards it, feeling his heartbeat quicken involuntarily. He knew that the shadow was undoubtedly not a spiny shrimp, as it was at least 3 to 4 meters long. Chapter 9. The Monster in the Darkness. Fortunately, Zhou found himself positioned within the triangular space created by the 2 algae oxygenation tanks, meaning he did not have to worry about the shadow launching an attack from beneath the water. Zhou's eyes were fixed intently on the surface of the water, the headlamp's beams sweeping back and forth across the churning surface, while his right hand retrieved a spike from his waist, gripping it tightly. Zhou stood in silent anticipation, awaiting the retreat of the sea. However, calamity struck. At this precarious moment, an unforeseen incident occurred. The headlamp's power dwindled. The already dim light grew fainter and began to flicker ominously. Damn it, running out of power now, of all times. Zhou cursed under his breath. Yet, he dared not free a hand to manually recharge. He squinted, relying on the flickering glimmer to continue observing the water surface. At this juncture, the passage of time felt interminable. Ultimately, the headlamp's energy was entirely depleted, plunging his surroundings into utter darkness. In the fleeting second before the light extinguished, Zhou's expression shifted abruptly, for he had glimpsed a flesh-colored, elongated creature in the water ahead, something akin to a serpent or a tentacle. Suddenly, with a resounding splash, the surface of the water erupted as a creature surged forth. In the enveloping darkness, a wave of terror engulfed Zhou. He widened his eyes in a desperate attempt to discern his surroundings, but it was in vain. He could perceive nothing, and the dread of the unknown loomed larger in the shadows. A sharp crack. Zhou's head was violently struck, as if by the claw of some creature, which latched onto his spiked helmet. The claw appeared to bear barbs, exerting tremendous pressure on the helmet, producing a shrill sound akin to a sharp object scraping against armor. Overwhelmed by sheer terror, Zhou felt his entire being numb beneath the weight of fear. His right hand, clutching the spikes, trembled uncontrollably, entirely beyond his command. Stay calm. Stay calm. Zhou silently implored himself to remain composed, for only through calmness could he regain control over his body. At that moment, he sensed something wrapping around his neck, a slick and clammy sensation that sent shivers down his spine. What could it be? Tentacles? Enveloped in darkness, Zhou was utterly oblivious to the nature of the entity assailing him. As panic surged within him, a colossal creature, possessing 2 claws and legs adorned with writhing appendages, materialized in his mind, instilling a profound terror that lingered unrelentingly. The tentacles around his neck began to constrict, rendering his breaths labored and causing his face to flush with blood. Was he to perish once more? Wait, why did he say once more? The suffocating sensation felt eerily familiar. On his first day in this world, he had nearly succumbed to asphyxiation from a lack of oxygen. How infuriating! Perhaps sensing his impending demise, Zhou Wen's fear dissipated significantly, replaced by an overwhelming surge of anger. In that moment, adrenaline surged through him, revitalizing his numb body. With a sudden thrust, Zhou Wen swung his right hand, driving a sharp spike into the tentacles, ensnaring his neck. Heedless of the possibility of misdirecting it into his own flesh, the unknown creature emitted a piercing shriek in response to the assault, and Zhou Wen discerned that the sound emanated from its head, now fully engulfed in a state of rage. He paid no heed to such trivial details and began frantically slicing at the tentacles, constricting his throat with the sharp spike. Although the tentacles possessed remarkable resilience, they were utterly incapable of withstanding the sharpness of the spikes, and soon enough, they were severed by Zhou Wen. The severed tentacles thrashed wildly in Zhou Wen's grasp, releasing copious amounts of a foul, viscous liquid that splattered all over him. After a brief interval, the creature fell utterly silent, though its claws remained firmly affixed to the spiked helmet, now devoid of strength. As the fury subsided and the effects of adrenaline waned, a creeping sense of fear enveloped Zhou Wen once more. He swallowed hard, hesitant to make any sudden movements, remaining still as he awaited the receding tide. Perhaps it is dead? Doubt flickered in Zhou Wen's mind, for the creature's claws still clutched his head, and the surrounding darkness rendered him blind to the situation. After a while, mustering his courage, Zhou Wen removed his headlamp and began to crank it for power. The light flickered a few times before casting a dim, yellow glow that illuminated his surroundings. Before him lay a multitude of bloodstains alongside a severed tentacle, which drooped over an algal oxygenation chamber, still dripping blood from its severed end. This must be the main body. Zhou Wen directed the light towards it and discovered a segmented form approximately 3 meters long and the width of a bowl. Suddenly, he recalled the shrill cries emanating from the head earlier and, realizing the implication, swiftly removed his helmet. On the helmet, for claw-like appendages resembling ship anchors clung tenaciously to it, their tiny barbs embedded within the material. In the midst of 4 ship anchor claws, there lay a circular mouth adorned with curved, dagger-like teeth. Goodness, if I were to bite down on my head, what would become of me? Upon observing the creature's overall appearance, Zhou Wen was drenched in cold sweat. The fact that the monster had not penetrated his skull was nothing short of sheer luck. The helmet shell offered no true defense against the creature's sharp fangs. His survival was entirely attributed to the 3 pointed spikes atop his helmet, which had prevented the monster's 4 claws from fully enclosing around his head. The toothy maw was thus kept at a safe distance from the helmet itself, rendering it incapable of delivering a fatal bite. This spiked helmet has truly saved my life, Zhou Wen thought, still trembling from the encounter. The creature's data should now be recorded in the biological compendium. Suddenly recalling the biological catalog, he promptly accessed the system interface and located the entry for this monstrous being. Anchorhead worm. Length, 2 to 3 meters. Weight, 30 to 40 kilograms. Diet. Blood description. A parasitic worm residing within the bodies of gigantic organisms. Its sharp mouthparts can effortlessly breach the skulls of adults. The 4 anchor claws resemble the scythe of death, without a sturdy helmet for protection. Capture would be tantamount to a death sentence. The anchor claws can also be fashioned into tools. After reading the entry on the anchorhead worm, Zhou Wen felt an even greater sense of dread. His survival was purely a matter of fortunate circumstances. He had fortuitously acquired the design for the spiked helmet and managed to craft it just in time to thwart the anchorhead worm's assault. Suddenly, a tumultuous sound of surging seawater echoed within the esophagus. Zhou Wen suddenly recalled that the feeding of the illusory leviathan had not yet concluded. Hastily, he removed the anchor-headed worm from his helmet and carelessly discarded it aside, donning the helmet once more. He refrained from exiting the triangular space of the algal oxygen chamber, as he suspected that more anchor-headed worms might be lurking within the seawater during this feeding session. Remaining within this sanctuary felt significantly safer. After patiently waiting for the illusory leviathan to finish its meal, and finding no further signs of the anchor-headed worms, Zhou Wen cautiously departed from the area where the spiny shrimp were stored. Chapter 10. A bountiful harvest while transporting seaweed and collecting spiny shrimp. Zhou Wen periodically recharged his headlamp to ensure an adequate power supply for unforeseen circumstances. He was eager to avoid another encounter with an unknown creature in the darkness. Approximately half an hour later, He had successfully transferred all the seaweed from the stomach chamber to the digestion pool, encountering no further anchor-headed worms. In total, he had acquired 58 spiny shrimp, 8 of which were lively and unscathed by the illusory Leviathan S attacks, their shells intact and suitable for crafting spiny helmets. The remaining 50 were severely damaged, rendering them unusable. Thus, Zhou decided against peeling them and opted to trade them with their shells intact in the trading channel. Notably, he did not experience any signs of hypoxia this time, indicating the efficacy of the algal oxygen chamber. Taking several deep breaths, he found the air within the stomach chamber to be plentiful and refreshing. Once his tasks were completed, Zhou, when rested atop the supply crate, accessed the system interface and initiated a direct trade of 3 spiny shrimp with Jiang Haitao. In the recent encounter with the hammerhead worm, the spiked helmet proved to be of paramount importance for survival. With an ample supply of spiked krill at hand, offering a couple to Jiang Haitao seems a fitting gesture of gratitude. Wait, brother one, did you send the wrong number? How did 3 end up in a trade? No mistake, I indeed sent you 3. Really? Thank you so much, brother one. It appears that brother one had quite a fruitful day. Indeed, the bounty was substantial. It nearly cost me my life. Huh, are you alright, brother one? What happened? Zhou then recounted the incident involving the hammerhead worm to Jiang Haitao. Is there really such a perilous creature out there? Upon hearing Zhou Wen's account, Jiang Haitao felt a wave of unease wash over him. If Zhou had encountered such a creature, it was conceivable that he might also face it one day, but he lacked the protective spiked helmet. Brother one, may I trade 2 spiked krill for a spiked helmet? Before Zhou could respond, Jiang Haitao promptly sent another message. Rest assured, brother one, I understand that 2 spiked krill may not suffice. Should I find more seeds in the future, I will gladly gift you 1, or if you need materials, I shall provide them without hesitation. I'll give you 1 outright. The schematics he acquired from Jiang Haitao fortuitously saved his life. And since he was most familiar with Jiang Haitao in this world, gifting him a spiked helmet could be considered a personal favor. Isn't that inappropriate? Not at all. It won't deplete my materials significantly. Brother one, you are like a real brother to me. Thank you immensely. Concluding his conversation with Jiang Haitao, Zhou turned his gaze toward the carcass of the anchor-headed worm. He pondered whether its flesh could augment his attributes. However, he quickly dismissed this thought, for the biological compendium did not indicate that the flesh of the anchor-headed worm was edible. It could be toxic, and that would spell disaster. After a while, the first supply crate arrived, and Zhou opened it with anticipation. Ding! Acquired iron, or X1. Acquired copper, or X1. Acquired sand X10. To his surprise, he had even found metallic ore. In the following hours, Zhou planned to trade the meat of the spiny shrimp with other survivors. But he needed to wait for 3 or 4 more hours. He intended to wait until the other survivors received their first supply crate of the day, allowing him to exchange the spiny shrimp meat for something of greater value or for a larger quantity of supplies. Zhou calculated briefly. Today marked the 4th day, and other survivors could only obtain 1 supply crate per day, totaling merely 5 crates among them, which amounted to a modest yield. In truth, to maximize his gains, it would be prudent to wait several more days, perhaps 10 days to half a month, certainly yielding more supplies. Yet, the spiny shrimp could not be preserved for that length of time, as he lacked refrigeration. The supply crates could only serve as containers and offered no preservation capabilities. Moreover, based on Zhou conjectures, it was likely that someone would encounter spiny shrimp in the coming days. This was due to his assistance in accelerating the digestion of the Leviathan, which enabled it to cover distances 3 to 4 times that of other survivors each day. The following day, Zhou encountered the spiny shrimp, and according to his estimations, others must have already come across them. With this thought in mind, he promptly opened the global communication channel to see if anyone was discussing it. Wow, have you all encountered shrimp that are 20 to 30 centimeters long? Brother, are you sure you're not just hallucinating from hunger? Exactly. You must be delirious from starvation. If such large shrimp truly existed, we would never have to go hungry again. I wake up every day from hunger. Stop it. Just thinking about 20 to 30 centimeters of shrimp makes my mouth water. What are you talking about? I'm speaking the truth. If what you say is true, then you're in luck. You might just have a hearty meal. A hearty meal? That shrimp has 7 or 8 centimeters of sharp spines on its head. It sliced my pants open. Had I not noticed in time, I would have suffered a deep cut on my leg. Really? Is there truly such a large shrimp? Do you think I'm joking? That shrimp is bouncing not far from where I am. Well, find a way to kill it. That's shrimp meat. It can even be eaten raw. The subsequent discussions revolve around methods to slay the spiny shrimp, prompting Zhou Wen to close the global communication channel. Indeed, others had encountered the spiny shrimp. A sense of urgency surged within Zhou Wen, for in a few days, other survivors would also come across the spiny shrimp, and by then, the value of what he possessed would diminish. 3 to 4 hours later, other survivors acquired the first supply crate of the day. Zhou Wen promptly divided the 50 spiny shrimp in his possession into 5 distinct trading methods and listed them in the trading channel. The first trading option was for blueprints. 1 blueprint could be exchanged for 1 spiny shrimp, with a total of 10 available for trade. The second option involved food. A can of food, a loaf of bread, and a bottle of water could be traded for 1 spiny shrimp, with 10 available in total. The third option was for medical supplies. 1 medical item could be exchanged for 1 spiny shrimp, also totaling 10. The fourth option pertained to metal ores. 10 units of metal ore could be traded for 1 spiny shrimp, again totaling 10. The fifth option concerned basic materials. 50 units of basic materials could be exchanged for 1 spiny shrimp, with a total of 10 available. Spiny shrimp meat for sale. Visible in the trading channel. Consuming spiny shrimp meat can enhance one's strength slightly, with limited quantities available on a first-come, first-served basis. Once Zhou Wen's message was posted in the global communication channel, it was akin to cold water splashed on a boiling oil, instantly igniting a frenzy. Have you gone mad playing this game? It even enhances strength. How foolish. I cannot speak for others, but you are indeed foolish. The character panel data is visible in the system interface. Isn't the purpose of this panel to allocate points? Isn't that spiny shrimp the kind I've seen? About 20 to 30 centimeters long? Is it real? I just checked the trading channel, and to be honest, it seems a bit pricey. However, if it is truly 20 to 30 centimeters in size, the meat should be substantial. Coupled with a slight increase in strength, it might be acceptable. As a multitude of individuals began to ponder the prospect of purchasing, engaging in discussions regarding the most advantageous trading methods, an ill-timed message surfaced within the communication channel. Seriously, do you all truly believe him? Just because he claims to enhance one's power, does that make a verity? Who can substantiate such a claim? Furthermore, another inquiry arose. Have you considered that if it were indeed possible to augment one's strength, why would he choose to sell it? Surely it would be more beneficial to consume it himself, and thereby amplify his own power. The emergence of these two messages abruptly diminished the once vibrant atmosphere of the global communication channel. Chapter 11. The wooden platform. Zhou Wen observed the individual's messages without exhibiting any signs of anger, instead wearing a smile. Following the posting of his 2 messages in the global communication channel, this individual promptly traded 4 units of spiny shrimp meat using 200 units of basic materials in the trading channel. What a cunning move. Clearly, this person was apprehensive about the influx of traders, thus deliberately casting doubt in the global communication channel to secure additional time for himself to trade more spiny shrimp meat. Having traded 4 units at once, he may very well be engaging in reselling. One can only wonder where he obtained 200 units of basic materials. Presently, the rest of the individuals possessed merely 5 boxes, aside from the initial supply box of food distributed by the world system on the first day. Even if the remaining 4 boxes were entirely composed of basic materials, they would yield only 120 units in total. Could it be that this individual has devised a method to expedite the digestion process for the illusory Leviathan? However, Zhou Wen immediately dismissed his thoughts. If the other party had truly conceived of this method, he should have encountered the spiny shrimp long ago and would not need to trade basic materials at all. After a moment's contemplation, only one possibility arose: collaborating with an acquaintance to pool together 200 units of materials, exchanging them for 4 spiny shrimp, consuming 1 each, and subsequently selling the remaining 2 for greater resources. At that moment, a private message arrived from the very individual who had raised doubts in the global channel. Apologies. My comments did not disrupt your trading, did they? Not significantly, Zhou Wen replied, glancing at the trading information. At this point, all 10 units of spiny shrimp meat intended for the exchange of basic materials have been traded. That is good to hear. I would like to pose a question to you. Feel free to ask. Zhou Wen did not dwell on the other party's previous remarks. Although they had indeed had some effect, the fact that the individual had traded 4 spiny shrimps in one go would likely encourage onlookers to follow suit. After all, basic materials were currently of little use, Without having acquired blueprints, they were merely a heap of refuse. Trading 50 units of useless basic materials for a spiny shrimp measuring 20 to 30 centimeters, which contained 3 to 4 pounds of meat, would not be considered a loss, even if it did not enhance strength points. I wish to know, does the spiny shrimp meat only enhance strength points upon the first consumption? Indeed, the second consumption will not provide any enhancement. Zhou responded candidly, as it was apparent that the other party had already surmised this and was merely seeking confirmation. He did not mention this information in the global exchange channel because he wished to allow those fortunate individuals, such as those holding multiple blueprints, to believe that the more spiny shrimp they consumed, the greater their power points would accumulate. In doing so, he could procure an abundance of blueprints, as revealing the truth beforehand would surely deter them from trading their blueprints. Thank you very much. My name is Chung Yongming. May I know your esteemed name? My name is Zhou. I appreciate your generosity, Brother Zhou. If I acquire any blueprints in the future, I will certainly prioritize trading with you. After concluding his conversation with Chung Yongming, Zhou glanced at the trading information. He had listed 50 spiny shrimp, of which 43 had already been sold. He then surveyed the global exchange channel, where numerous individuals corroborated that consuming spiny shrimp indeed granted a slight increase in strength, which elucidated the swift nature of the transactions. The remaining 7 were intended for trading blueprints, which were evidently quite rare. Most individuals who had obtained blueprints likely used them for personal enhancement, leaving only a few for trade. After waiting for 3 hours, the illusory Leviathan had consumed its second treasure chest, yet no one had traded for blueprints. If no exchanges occur by the time the third supply box arrived today, he would resort to trading basic resources instead. Zhou expressed his mild frustration as he casually opened the second supply box. Ping. Acquired 3 bottles of mineral water. 3 bottles of mineral water. Not too shabby, although I'm no longer in need of water. Zhou mused as he surveyed the substantial resources he had traded for, smiling as he began to examine the items he had received in exchange. Only 3 blueprints were traded: the wooden foundation blueprint, the iron dagger blueprint, and the spiked leg armor blueprint. The spiked leg armor blueprint? It seems to be part of set. I wonder if I can complete the entire ensemble. Zhou paused for a moment, then chuckled softly. He immediately utilized all 3 blueprints and began to examine the materials required for their creation. The wooden foundation blueprint requires 20 units of wood. The iron dagger blueprint necessitates 1 iron ingot and 1 piece of wood. Goodness, an iron ingot? Where on earth am I supposed to find that? Zhou realized that crafting the iron dagger would not be feasible in the short term. As for the spiked leg armor blueprint, it calls for 8 units of spiked shrimp shells and 10 pieces of cloth. I need 8 shells, but I currently possess only 5. I should be able to craft it tomorrow, Zhou mused. Today he had acquired 8 shrimp shells, but he had used 3 to create a spiked helmet for Jiang Haitao, leaving him with just 5. Having perused the blueprints, it was now time to assess the food supplies. 10 cans, along with 10 loaves of bread and 10 bottles of mineral water, meant that Zhou need not worry about food for the time being. The 10 cans were all tin packaged fruits, canned peaches, canned coconut, canned oranges, and so forth. Although lacking in meat, Zhou was nonetheless delighted to carefully stow away these valuable provisions. As for medical supplies, Zhou glanced over them and was taken aback to find 9 packages of medical tourniquets, alongside a box of anti-inflammatory medication. Despite the overwhelming presence of bandages, they were all essential for survival, and Zhou diligently stored them away, placing them out of reach of water. In the realm of trade, a total of 100 units of metallic ores were exchanged, comprised of 50 units of iron ore and 50 units of copper ore. Subsequently, there were foundational materials amounting to 500 units. Zhou had not categorized them, intending to wait until evening to exchange the remaining spiny shrimp for foundational materials before organizing everything together. With the remaining time, Zhou decided to construct a wooden foundation to observe its characteristics, feeling sufficiently affluent in foundational materials to indulge a little. He opened the blueprints and initiated the construction. The moment the wooden foundation materialized, a look of astonishment graced Zhou's face. He had anticipated that the wooden foundation would lie directly upon the ground. Yet to his surprise, it consisted of 4 1-meter-long wooden stakes supporting a flat surface, elevated 1 meter above the ground, an ideal height that would not succumb to the encroaching sea. No longer would he have to endure daily immersion in the water. Overjoyed, Zhou exclaimed loudly, for in recent days, he had been inundated by the sea multiple times each day, perpetually damp and uncomfortable, a sensation too difficult to articulate. Now, with the wooden foundation in place, he could remain atop it while the Leviathan transformed and consumed the supply crates, descending only when the tide receded to attend to his tasks. Amidst his elation, Zhou harbored concerns about the stability of the wooden foundation and whether it might be swept away by the waves. Accordingly, he pushed against the wooden structure with all his might, discovering that the 4 wooden stakes appeared to be intrinsically connected to the surrounding space, immovable and steadfast. Although the underlying principle eluded him, he dismissed such thoughts and reveled in his creation. Zhou proceeded to construct 6 wooden foundations, each occupying an area of 1 square meter, ultimately forming a platform measuring 2 by 3 meters. All the supply boxes have been moved to the platform, alleviating any concerns about them being swept away by the sea. Chapter 12. Glowing eyes, by the way. Could the reason for the inability to construct the small planting box be due to the lack of a foundation? Upon this realization, Zhou's eyes sparkled with excitement. He felt it was quite possible. Without delay, he began to construct the small planting box. Did he succeed? Indeed. Just as he had envisioned. The small planting box was successfully built upon the wooden platform. Zhou danced with joy, elated by the prospect of achieving self-sufficiency. It was a splendid day, and everything he wished for seemed to come true. Filled with happiness, Zhou began to sing, then retrieved watermelon seeds from the supply box and planted them in the small planting box. What a bountiful day it was, he pondered, unaware of how long it would take for the watermelons to mature. With nothing else to occupy his time, Zhou laid back on the dry wooden platform, awaiting the arrival of the 3rd supply box. 3 hours later, when the 3rd supply box arrived, Zhou sat on the wooden platform, waiting for the tide to recede before leaping down to open the box. Ding! Acquired the Accelerated Growth Food Codex for the Illusory Leviathan, 110. Accelerated Growth Food Codex? As the name suggests, Zhou surmised its purpose. It likely contained records of food types that could expedite the growth of the Illusory Leviathan. However, currently, he only possessed a fragment, rendering it temporarily useless. He carefully stored it away. Zhou cast a glance at the trading channel. It found no one engaging in the exchange of spiny shrimp. Consequently, he promptly altered his trading items to basic materials. Within mere minutes, the last 7 spiny shrimp were completely traded away. A total of 17 spiny shrimp yielded 850 portions of fundamental materials, which included 200 units each of stone, wood, and soil, along with 100 units each of sand and hay, and 50 units of fabric. Earlier, he had constructed a wooden foundation, consuming 120 units of wood, while the small planting box required 10 units of wood and 10 units of soil. At present, Zhou's inventory of basic materials comprised 90 units of wood, 210 units of stone, 210 units of soil, 110 units of sand, 110 units of hay, and 50 units of fabric. The depletion of wood was considerable, and he mused that he would need to trade for more wood in the future. After a while, the Illusory Leviathan ceased its movements, indicating that it was time for rest. Zhou had only consumed a single piece of bread today, and with ample food at hand, he resolved to indulge in a can of fruit to enhance his dining experience. With a decisive pull, he opened the can, releasing a wave of sweet aroma intertwined with the fragrance of yellow peaches that wafted into his nostrils. Zhou brought his nose closer, inhaling deeply with a look of pure delight, and then eagerly sipped a generous mouthful of the sweet broth. For a moment, the long-forgotten sweetness flooded his mouth, enveloping his taste buds. Ah, how wonderful it is to be alive! Zhou had never imagined that a mere can could evoke such a heartfelt exclamation. Lacking chopsticks, he wiped his hands on his clothing, deftly pinching out a half-piece of succulent peach from the can, which he slowly placed into his mouth. The succulent flesh of the yellow peach filled his mouth entirely, and with each chew, the flavor intensified, a harmonious blend of sweetness intermingled with a hint of tartness, rendering it exquisitely delightful and leaving a lingering aftertaste. Soon, Zhou finished the peach, savoring every last drop of the juice from the tin can. He gazed at the empty metal container, licking his lips, feeling a tinge of regret as he was not inclined to indulge further. Zhou tucked the tin can away and reclined on the wooden platform, swiftly drifting into a deep slumber. He dreamt of a ripe watermelon, relishing the bliss of devouring it. As another day dawned, Zhou was awakened, as usual, by the rumblings of his empty stomach. This sleep was the most restful he had experienced in the 5 days since his arrival in this world, as he lay on the dry wooden platform, completely insulated from the damp ground below. The first thing Zhou did upon waking was to approach the small planting box to check if the watermelon seeds had germinated. To his dismay, there was no sign of life. After a night's passage, the seeds remained unresponsive. He pondered, could the growth rate of watermelons here differ significantly from that on Earth? He had expected that, in this world, the growth of watermelons would be considerably faster, given that it was a realm of survival where food was scarce. If crops grew too slowly, they might not mature before hunger claimed lives. Could it be due to the lack of sunlight? Zhou contemplated this possibility as he surveyed the pitch-black surroundings. His daily activities relied entirely on the illumination from his headlamp. Without it, there would be no light whatsoever, and the growth of crops necessitated sunlight. If it is indeed true that watermelon seeds cannot thrive without sunlight, then my agricultural aspirations would be utterly doomed. Zhou gazed despondently at the desolate small planting box, his face a portrait of dismay. Within the confines of his stomach space, it was inconceivable for sunlight to penetrate. Was he to relocate these planting boxes outdoors? Such a notion was patently impossible. He pondered whether he could obtain the blueprint for a grow light. However, without sunlight, cultivating plants would necessitate the use of artificial light sources. Yet with his current materials, even if he possessed the blueprint for a grow light, he could not fabricate it. Thus, the once enthusiastic Zhou, who had aspired to cultivate the land with fervor, found himself utterly deflated, his dream shattered. He slowly reclined, resembling a lifeless fish devoid of motivation. After a while, the Leviathan began its feeding for the day. Lying despondently on the ground, Zhou recalled the harrowing scene from yesterday, when he was attacked by the anchorhead worm. Instantly, he steeled himself, donned his spiked helmet, and proceeded to recharge his headlamp. Although the inability to farm weighed heavily on him, he was unwilling to succumb to despair. The perilous events of yesterday were vivid in his memory, and he had to remain ever vigilant. With a rush, seawater surged into the stomach space, prompting Zhou to retreat to the farthest corner of the wooden platform, maintaining a 2-meter distance from the water's surface to avoid being ensnared by the pincers of the anchorhead worm. Utilizing the illumination from his headlamp, he scanned the water's surface back and forth, detecting no signs of large creatures lurking within. Just as Zhou began to believe that this feeding session was free from the threat of anchorhead worms, 2 points of light suddenly flickered to life beneath the water. 2 luminous orbs, perfectly round and roughly the size of a fist, resembled eyes intently gazing at him from beneath the water. Zhou was startled, beads of cold sweat forming on his brow. He quickly crouched down, pressing his back against the wall of the platform to position himself in the blind spot of any aquatic creature's attack. What on earth is this? Zhou cursed inwardly, instinctively adjusting the spiked helmet atop his head, feeling a slight sense of reassurance upon confirming it was securely in place. He refrained from making any rash movements, opting to wait until the seawater receded to assess the situation. The creatures of this world were entirely aquatic, and the presence or absence of water made a significant difference. Without the obstruction of seawater, he would be able to discern the true size of these fist-sized eyes and gauge his ability to confront them. The wait for the water to withdraw felt interminable, sweat trickling down Zhou's forehead. His anxiety was palpable, his body remaining in a half-crouched position, ready to evade should the creature beneath the surface launch an attack. At last, the water fully receded. Gathering his courage, Zhou cautiously approached the edge of the wooden platform, directing the beam of his headlamp towards the previously illuminated eyes. To his surprise, the terrifying giant creature he had envisioned did not manifest. Instead, the glowing orbs turned out to be 2 luminescent spherical objects. What could these be? Zhou pondered, and noticing that the glowing spheres posed no threat, he leaped down from the platform, advancing to within 2 to 3 meters of the luminous orbs. Are these merely light bulbs? 2 luminous spheres emitted a soft white glow, though their brightness was rather feeble, even dimmer than his headlamp, casting light only within a radius of approximately 1 meter. Chapter 13. Sunlight Sphere Worm. Zhou cautiously approached and gently prodded one of the glowing spheres with the tip of his sharp instrument. The sphere rolled over a few times before its radiant body gradually dimmed, revealing an orifice at the bottom reminiscent of a pinhole, accompanied by 4 tentacles designed for adhesion. Instinctively, Zhou took a few steps back, wary of any potential offensive maneuvers from the luminous sphere. However, it appeared indifferent to him. Its tentacles stirred slightly as it righted itself and reattached to the wall of the stomach, its dim form once again emanating a soft white light. What manner of creature is this? Suddenly, Zhou recalled the biological encyclopedia and promptly accessed the system interface. Sunlight sphere worm. Length, 10 centimeters. Weight, 1 kilogram. Diet, blood evaluation. A luminescent parasite with little offensive capability, perhaps useful for illumination. Another parasite, yet far more endearing than the anchorhead worm, Zhou mused as he observed the 2 glowing sunlight sphere worms. According to the information provided by the encyclopedia, the sunlight sphere worms are typically 10 centimeters in size, but the 2 before him measured only 6 to 7 centimeters, suggesting they had yet to reach maturity. Wait a moment. Sunlight sphere worm? Could they possibly provide sunlight for the watermelon seeds? Zhou suddenly grasped the crux of the matter, and his spirits soared with excitement. He swiftly shed his garment, wrapping it around his palm, and deftly seized the sunlight sphere insect from the ground. The sunlight sphere insect, unable to draw blood, dimmed in its luminescence. Its 4 diminutive tentacles danced restlessly, while its pinhole-like mouthpart roamed in search of sustenance. After a brief interval, seemingly thwarted in its quest to reach the stomach wall, the insect retracted its needle-like mouthpart and withdrew its 4 short tentacles, transforming entirely into a spherical form. Quite endearing. In fact, Zhou ascended the wooden platform, cradling the sunlight sphere insect, and approached the position designated for the small planting box. This compact cultivation box was conveniently situated near the stomach wall. Zhou positioned the sunlight sphere insect adjacent to it. Sensing the proximity of nourishment, the insect extended its 4 tentacles, adhering to the stomach wall, and subsequently pierced its pinhole mouthpart into it. As it began to draw blood, the body of the sunlight sphere insect illuminated once more, casting a glow throughout the small planting box. Zhou silently hoped for a beneficial effect. Afterward, he captured another sunlight sphere insect and placed it against the stomach wall beside the small planting box. The overlapping radiance of the 2 provided ample light. After some time, the Leviathan entered a state of digestion, while Zhou had already transferred all the seaweed intended for consumption into the digestion pool. The day was remarkably tranquil, devoid of encounters with aggressively predatory creatures like the anchor-headed worm. Today, there were only 5 spiny shrimp. Zhou promptly dispatched them, removing their shells, and subsequently traded the flesh of the 5 spiny shrimp he had left from yesterday, acquiring 250 basic materials in return. During his transportation of seaweed, Zhou stumbled upon another sunball parasite, bringing his total to 3. He directed all of them to provide sunlight for the watermelon seeds, fervently hoping for their swift germination. While waiting for the transformation Leviathan to digest, Zhou opened the world communication channel to gauge the situation of other survivors. As he had surmised, hundreds of survivors had discovered spiny shrimp today. Some of those who had encountered spiny shrimp and traded materials with Zhou yesterday were now filled with regret, believing they had exchanged a substantial amount of resources for something they could have obtained themselves. A few even sought Zhou's explanation in the world channel, demanding a refund for their traded materials. Naturally, Zhou refused to return anything and concocted a somewhat reasonable justification. I had no idea you would also encounter spiny shrimp. When I found them, none of you were present. My sale of spiny shrimp was entirely justified, and there is no rationale for refunding the materials. Despite this statement, those individuals continued to press Zhou for a refund, yet he chose to ignore them. Today, while many survivors had indeed discovered spiny shrimp, there were still far more who had not. Thus, the spiny shrimp retained a robust market demand. His statement was not directed at the few individuals seeking to withdraw supplies, but rather intended for those within the global channel. A reasonable explanation was necessary to prevent other survivors from perceiving him as a mercenary, which would jeopardize his future business endeavors. Soon, the global channel paid little heed to the trivial antics of those few clowns, as many had realized that slaying the spiny shrimp was an arduous task following their encounters. The shrimp's shell was remarkably resilient, and it bore a sharp spike atop its head, which posed a risk of injury if one were not cautious. Without weapons, eliminating the spiny shrimp proved exceedingly difficult. Consequently, some individuals turned their attention to Zhou Wen, who had sold a considerable number of spiny shrimp the previous day. Esteemed one, you sold 50 spiny shrimp yesterday. Might you share your method for dispatching them? Indeed, please, we implore you to enlighten us. Zhou Wen did not conceal his approach. He recounted the technique he employed during his initial encounter with the spiny shrimp, suggesting that they utilized the spike atop the shrimp's head as a tool for shelling. This method was not an obscure secret. With a little contemplation, one could easily arrive at such a conclusion. Zhou Wen generously disclosed this information to all, thereby garnering the goodwill of his fellow survivors. After discussing the method for killing spiny shrimp, the survivors in the global channel began to engage in casual conversation, during which one individual proposed a notion. Upon reading this person's comment, Zhou Wen furrowed his brow, for the suggestion involved assisting the illusionary leviathan in digestion to extend its activity duration. After several days of observation, I discovered that the leviathan's gastric peristalsis occurs at a sluggish pace, yet the digestion of seaweed within its digestive chamber transpires with remarkable speed. The protracted process of transferring seaweed into the digestive chamber through gastric movements led me to a hypothesis. If we were to manually transport these seaweeds and deposit them directly into the digestive chamber, might we circumvent the lengthy gastric peristalsis and thereby enhance the leviathan's digestive efficiency? This could potentially afford the leviathan additional time for activity, and one wonders whether this surplus of active time would yield an abundance of resource crates for us. This conjecture immediately captivated the attention of all within the global channel. Indeed, this makes a great deal of sense, exclaimed one participant. It is evident that there exists a disparity in perception among individuals. I had never considered this before. Coincidentally, the leviathan had recently feasted, providing a timely opportunity to test this theory. Some found the hypothesis compelling and were prepared to embark on this experiment, only to be halted by another individual. Hold on. While this theory is indeed plausible, there exists a grave concern. What concern? Came the inquiry. Oxygen levels was the response. Many of you may have experienced it. During the period after the leviathan has digested, when it begins to move, there's a noticeable difficulty in breathing, which only dissipates once the leviathan consumes resource crates. Is that so? Indeed, it appears to be the case. Several survivors reflected on their experiences and confirmed the observation. This indicates that the oxygen levels within the gastric cavity can only sustain static respiration, proving inadequate for the dynamic actions required for transporting seaweed. The hypothesis proposed by that friend holds considerable merit, yet without addressing the oxygen deficiency, one should refrain from reckless experimentation, lest they succumb to asphyxiation. Chapter 14. The advantage will vanish. Zhou Wen observed the remarks of the two individuals, a sense of crisis welling up within him. His current advantage over other survivors lies in his ability to expedite the digestion of a leviathan by transporting seaweed, thereby acquiring additional supply crates. However, it has come to the attention of others, who have also recognized the peril of insufficient oxygen. It won't be long before someone else devises a similar strategy, ultimately nullifying his lead. He feels the pressure of being overtaken, pondering ways to maintain his advantage. Zhou Wen was interrupted as the first supply crate of the day was ushered in by the ocean's currents. Ding! Acquired steel-armored Leviathan Pest Removal Voucher X1. The steel-armored Leviathan Pest Removal Voucher is roughly the size of a 100 yuan banknote, its surface gleaming in golden hues, seemingly crafted from gold itself. As Zhou Wen grasped the voucher, a notification resonated in his mind. Steel-armored Leviathan Pest Removal Voucher. Upon usage, one may enter the interior of an adult steel-armored Leviathan to eradicate all parasites residing within the gastric cavity. Upon task completion, one may return, and all items acquired within the Leviathan's gastric cavity may be taken along. It appears to be akin to a ticket for a gaming dungeon. Through the auditory cue resonating in his mind, Zhou Wen comprehended the function of the pest control voucher for the armored Leviathan and the potential rewards it could yield. However, he refrained from immediate utilization, for the auditory prompt had elucidated clearly that he must enter the gastric cavity of the armored Leviathan to eradicate the parasites. Given his current prowess and equipment, confronting even a single anchorworm proved to be a formidable challenge, let alone a multitude of parasites. Merely 4 days after its birth, the illusory Leviathan was already afflicted by the aggressive anchorworm, and the mere thought of the parasite count within an adult armored Leviathan sent shivers down Zhou Wen's spine. He stowed away the pest control voucher and resumed his observation of the discussions among other survivors in the global communication channel. There must be a solution to the oxygen deficiency. As long as we can acquire the blueprint for oxygen-producing items, the hypothesis regarding the transportation of seaweed could be realized. One individual proposed a remedy for the oxygen shortage, and upon reading this assertion, Zhou gaze was immediately drawn to the algae oxygenation chamber nestled in the corner. At that moment, Zhou found himself in a quandary. He contemplated seizing this opportunity to sell the algae oxygenation chamber at a premium, while simultaneously wishing to delay the other survivors from swiftly transporting seaweed. After considerable deliberation, Zhou arrived at a resolution. He would capitalize on the high demand for the algae oxygenation chamber, insisting that the exchanged items must include a blueprint. His rationale for this decision stemmed from the understanding that even if he chose not to sell it now, eventually someone would unveil the blueprint for oxygen production, thereby diminishing the value of the algae oxygenation chamber he possessed. Furthermore, once individuals set their sights on a goal and nurtured hope, they would relentlessly pursue their objectives. He does not sell the algae oxygenation tanks. Once other survivors become aware that they can acquire additional supply crates by transporting seagrass, it is inevitable that some will devise methods akin to Zhou approach. Zhou's technique of moving seagrass while the Leviathan is in its transformation and feeding phase is not particularly difficult to conceive. Their current inability to do so stems primarily from an initial inertia in their thinking. They originally believed that only one supply crate would be available per day and had never considered transporting seagrass to expedite the Leviathan's digestion. However, with the emergence of the idea to obtain more supply crates, some astute individuals are bound to break free from their previous thought patterns and devise strategies to prevent suffocation. Zhou has another purpose for selling the algae oxygenation tanks: to temporarily divert their thoughts. With the availability of these tanks, they would naturally no longer need to worry about the risk of asphyxiation. Yet, to ensure that everyone refrains from contemplating solutions to this suffocation issue, a majority must be able to trade for the algae oxygenation tanks. Otherwise, he cannot set a high price, thus jeopardizing his plans to acquire the blueprints. Alternatively, the first unit could be offered at a low price, with subsequent purchases requiring a blueprint exchange. Zhou quickly considered this method. The oxygen produced by a single algae oxygenation tank is insufficient to resolve the oxygen deficit. If the frequency of movement is too high and oxygen consumption is excessive, the risk of suffocation will still persist. Some survivors, in their quest for survival, yearn for a second oxygen generator to completely eradicate the suffocation dilemma. The reward for such an endeavor is 3 supply boxes each day, a considerable return that makes exchanging a blueprint for the second generator a prudent decision. With this thought in mind, Zhou promptly took action and sent a message to the global communication channel. It seems fortune smiles upon me. Yesterday, I opened a supply box and fortuitously obtained a blueprint for an algae oxygen generator. I initially deemed it useless, but who would have thought its significance would be so profound? Wow, are you serious? That's some outrageous luck. Bro, are you selling the blueprint? Name your price. My word, you come right out asking for the blueprint? Only a fool would sell it to you. Brother, if you craft it, I'd be willing to buy it at a reasonable price. As Zhou anticipated, everyone began to inquire about the trading price of the algae oxygen generator, and the discourse surrounding oxygen deficiency was forgotten. Zhou refrained from hastily selling the generator. He intended to employ a strategy of scarcity marketing. Everyone, please hold your horses. I do not plan to sell today. After all, I am unsure of the oxygen output produced by the algae oxygen generator, so I need to test its efficacy for a couple of days before I consider selling it. Despite Zhou's assertions, there would inevitably be individuals seeking to purchase the algae oxygen generator privately, as some were unwilling to lag behind. Thus, he cleverly introduced the condition of exchanging the blueprint. Indeed, shortly after concluding his communication, someone sent him a private message, eager to purchase a unit in advance. Zhou's heart blossomed with joy, yet his words conveyed a profound sense of difficulty. Following a series of price increments from the other party, Zhou proposed an exchange for blueprints. However, the counterpart lacked any schematics, leading to the transaction's unfortunate demise. Nevertheless, Zhou felt no remorse, for he was acutely aware that he was not the sole recipient of private messages that day. In the hours that ensued, thousands reached out to him. Observing the multitude, Zhou ceased his idle chatter and directly proposed a blueprint exchange, swiftly narrowing the field to merely 30 individuals. Among this select group, 8 expressed their willingness to trade blueprints. With a hearty laugh, Zhou reveled in the prospect of acquiring 8 blueprints, even though they had yet to be in his possession. That day, the Leviathan had already feasted. Without seaweed, the creation of an oxygen-generating algae tank was impossible. Thus, he could only commence trades the following day. Just then, a second supply crate was swept in by the waves. Ding! Acquired sweet potato seeds, X1. To his delight, it was indeed sweet potato seeds. Wonderful. Zhou, already in high spirits from the impending arrival of 8 blueprints, found his joy further amplified by the acquisition of yet another seed. He promptly constructed a small planting box, positioning it within the radiant reach of his sunball creatures, and planted the sweet potato, watering it with half a bottle of mineral water. His sole wish was that the light from the 3 sunball creatures would suffice to replace sunlight and encourage germination. Chapter 15. The germination of crops. With little to occupy his time, Zhou awaited the arrival of the 3rd supply crate. Ding! Acquired bread X1, acquired mineral water X1. The 3rd supply crate revealed food, and Zhou, feeling quite hungry, promptly began to indulge in it. His provisions were still ample, so there was no need for him to endure hunger. Just as Zhou was savoring his meal, a private message arrived. Hello, my name is Chun Xian. I am the one who proposed the seaweed transportation hypothesis in the World Exchange Channel. I would like to trade an algae oxygenator with you. Is that possible? Upon reading Chun Xian's message, Zhou recognized her as the originator of the proposal that had undermined his earlier advantage. His previously cheerful mood evaporated instantly. How dare she approach him for a trade? Zhou was both amused and infuriated. I'm sorry, but I'm not trading today. Zhou concealed his anger, responding with a polite refusal. Chun Xian was a clever individual, and he did not wish to reveal any signs of his irritation. I can offer you a blueprint in exchange. Chun Xian persisted, presenting her most valuable asset. Even if you provide the blueprint, I cannot trade with you. I have exhausted the materials needed to manufacture the algae oxygenator, and I have no surplus to create another. Zhou continued to decline. While he would typically accept a trade involving a blueprint, the fact that Chun Xian had disrupted his leading position made him reluctant to allow her to gain the algae oxygenator ahead of other survivors. Then how many have you manufactured? If the quantity is sufficient, I could purchase one from you. Only 2. I need them for myself, so I cannot sell. Then, where are the manufacturing materials? I can provide the materials. I require seaweed. Zhou contemplated for a moment, revealing the primary materials required for the algal oxygen generator to his counterpart. At this juncture, all the phantasmal leviathans had been thoroughly consumed, leaving no one with any seagrass. Would it be possible to sell one? After all, I was the one who proposed the idea of transporting seagrass, which certainly benefited you. Moreover, this blueprint I possess is for a weapon, and it holds considerable value. You would undoubtedly gain from this exchange. Upon reading Chun Xian's statement, Zhou furrowed his brow slightly, as her reasoning was indeed sound. From an outsider's perspective, Chun Xian had made significant contributions to all the survivors. It was only reasonable, both morally and logically, to trade her an algal oxygen generator, especially since she was offering a blueprint in return. I understand you wish to seize this opportunity to get ahead of others, but in this unknown world, being ahead is not necessarily advantageous. The farther you venture, the closer danger approaches. Although one additional person may not provide direct assistance, we can remind each other and prepare in advance. Very well, your argument is compelling. I will trade you one. Zhou was persuaded by Chun Xian, acknowledging that he had indeed encountered the gravest peril first. On the 4th day, without the spiked helmet, you have perished. Thank you kindly. What is your name? Zhou. A pleasure to collaborate, Mr. Zhou. Zhou managed a wry smile, realizing that he was now 3 times ahead of everyone else, making collaboration rather challenging. Subsequently, he exchanged 1 algal oxygen generator for the blueprint with Chun Xian, and upon receiving the blueprint, Zhou was momentarily taken aback. The fishbone blade blueprint was undeniably a highly valuable document. The blueprint for this weapon requires a 1-meter-long fish spine, which promises to yield a considerably larger creation, offering greater initial value than those iron weapon blueprints demanding iron ingots. As the illusory Leviathan event concluded, Zhou took a moment to glance at the small planting box that had occupied his thoughts. To his astonishment, it had already sprouted. Zhou beheld a vibrant green watermelon seedling, his face alight with delight. The sunlight ball bug truly serves as a substitute for sunlight. He resolved to collect them whenever he encountered them again. Yet, a concern flickered through Zhou Wen's mind. Would an increase in the number of sunlight ball bugs adversely affect the growth of the illusory leviathan? Although the light emitted by these bugs promotes plant growth, they are essentially parasites, relying on the blood of the illusory leviathan for sustenance, thus posing a certain threat to its well-being. He decided to retain only 10 for agricultural purposes, eliminating any excess. After pondering for a moment, Zhou Wen established a maximum limit for the sunlight ball bug population. While farming held significant importance for him, he understood the necessity of prioritization. The cornerstone of Zhou Wen's survival in this world lay in the illusory leviathan. Its robust growth was fundamental to his continued existence. He could not jeopardize the healthy development of the illusory leviathan for the sake of agriculture. On the 6th day, as on the previous one, Zhou Wen's first action upon awakening was to rush to the small planting box. The watermelon seedlings, which had merely sprouted the previous afternoon, had grown to over 10 centimeters overnight, a growth rate that filled Zhou Wen with immense joy. The sweet potato had also sprouted, reaching 5 to 6 centimeters in height. It appears that my previous thoughts were indeed correct. The growth cycle of plants spans merely a few days. Zhou Wen gazed at the two vibrant seedlings, his mind already beginning to envision the scene a few days hence when the watermelons and sweet potatoes would reach maturity. The mere thought of achieving self-sufficiency stirred a thrill within him. Subsequently, Zhou Wen assessed his stock of stones. Today, he needed to fabricate 8 algae oxygenators for the exchange of 8 blueprints. With 210 stones in his possession, and knowing that each oxygenator required only 10 stones, he had more than sufficient resources. After a brief respite, the Leviathan began its feeding process, prompting Zhou Wen to don his spiked helmet. He then utilized 8 shrimp shells and 10 fabric pieces to craft a spiked greave. Once adorned with the greave, Zhou Wen focused intently on the seawater surging into the space of his stomach. Ever since the encounter with the anchorhead worm, a subtle dread had crept into his heart during the Leviathan's feeding times. In this pitch-black expanse, the seawater loomed like an abyss concealing lurking monsters, instilling a persistent fear of an imminent attack from the creatures dwelling within the depths. As before, Zhou Wen positioned himself in a half-squat at the innermost part of the wooden platform, utilizing the beam of his headlamp to scan the darkened waters. Upon discerning no signs of aquatic life, he opened his blueprint compendium and commenced the fabrication of the algae oxygenators. There were no limitations on the quantity of production. He could simply click to create them in abundance. Zhou Wen proceeded to manufacture 20 units in one breath, occupying 1/5 of the stomach space, 8 of which were designated for today's blueprint trade. The remaining 12 units are intended for trade with other survivors tomorrow. Today, they were produced in advance due to concerns that extracting an excessive amount of seaweed at once would adversely affect the overall food supply for the transformed Leviathan. Zhou Wen has resolved to sell 20 algae oxygen generators daily. Although this quantity is merely a drop in the ocean compared to the 100 million survivors, he has no alternative. It is simply unfeasible for Zhou Wen to deplete the Leviathan's food reserves to cater to the demands of others. Ultimately, his motivations for these actions are self-serving, as sacrificing his own interests to aid others is not a viable option. Chapter 16. The issue of the spike set as soon as the transformed Leviathan finished its meal. Zhou Wen received multiple private messages from the 8 survivors who had expressed a willingness to trade blueprints yesterday. Having prepared 20 algae oxygen generators in advance for this moment, he proceeded with the trade without the slightest hesitation. Soon, Zhou Wen found himself in possession of 8 blueprints, which he glanced over briefly. The blueprints included spike belt, spike boots, spike bracers, spike codpiece, manure scoop, wooden shield, wooden bed, compost barrel. Noticing that 4 of the blueprints pertained to the spike set, a smile graced Zhou Wen's face. He promptly utilized all 8 blueprints, which transformed into a radiant blue light and entered the World Channel interface. Upon accessing the blueprint interface, he examined the materials required for their manufacture. Spiked belt blueprint requires spike krill shell X3, fabric X5. Spiked boots blueprint requires spiked krill shell X4, fabric X10. The designs for the spiked bracers require 4 spiked shrimp shells and 10 pieces of cloth. Upon noticing the requirement for 4 shrimp shells, Zhou Wen furrowed his brow. He currently had 1 shell strapped to each of his forearms, which served as makeshift bracers, significantly less costly than the materials needed for the spiked bracers. However, he conceded that his handmade versions were rather rudimentary. A glance at the shells tied with strips of cloth revealed their inability to withstand even moderate attacks. They would likely crumble under heavier strikes. After voicing his frustrations, Zhou turned his attention to the remaining 4 designs. The design for the pooper scooper required 5 pieces of wood. The notion of a pooper scooper made him chuckle. Where exactly was he supposed to scoop? He deemed this design the most impractical since he had yet to construct a toilet, rendering the need for such a tool non-existent. The wooden shield design also required 5 pieces of wood. This was armor indeed. With this, he felt more confident about utilizing the pest control tickets. Zhou examined the shield design, pleased by the simplicity of the materials required, nodding in satisfaction. Next was the wooden bed design, necessitating 10 pieces of wood. Zhou had little to say about this. Whether he slept on a wooden bed or a wooden platform made little difference. Ultimately, crafting it would merely serve to create the illusion of having a home. Lastly, the composter design called for 10 pieces of wood. Could the composter be used for creating fertilizer? Fertilizers are of paramount importance to his agricultural enterprise, requiring few materials. Zhou directly initiated the manufacturing process. After consuming 10 units of timber, a wooden barrel, standing 1 meter tall and with a diameter of 1 meter, materialized before him, complete with a lid for sealing purposes. Zhou gazed at the large barrel with delight, envisioning the scene of fertilizing his crops once the fertilizer was produced. However, after some deliberation, he found himself at a loss, for he was unaware of the specific steps involved in fertilizer production. He only knew that it required manure or some decayed leaves. Yet he currently lacked these materials. After exhausting his thoughts for a considerable time without arriving at a solution, Zhou had no choice but to temporarily abandon the endeavor and began transporting seaweed. Today's seaweed transportation went smoothly. He encountered no aggressive creatures and discovered no new species. He successfully collected a total of 8 spiked shrimp, which was a commendable harvest. Now, Zhou possessed 6 blueprints for spiked equipment. Having previously crafted a spiked helmet and spiked greaves, he needed a total of 17 shrimp shells to complete the remaining 4 pieces. Today, he acquired 8 shrimp shells, and with the 2 from yesterday, he had a total of 10 shells, still needing 7 more. Zhou decided to utilize the 10 shrimp shells to craft the spiked codpiece and spiked boots. The spiked boots were unremarkable, merely long boots adorned with spikes, which added a certain weight when worn. The spiked codpiece, rather than merely serving as protection, resembled a skirt-like armor that enveloped the entire circumference of the upper thigh, safeguarding the vital area completely, making it a crucial piece of equipment. Zhou had previously donned only the spiked helmet and spiked greaves, and had not perceived the weight of the spiked armor. However, upon equipping the spiked codpiece and spiked boots, he suddenly felt a notable heaviness in his form. This presented a conundrum. Zhou had already recognized the underlying issue. Now, even with merely 4 pieces of spiked armor, he felt encumbered, and the prospect of adding the remaining 2 pieces, the spiked belt and spiked bracers, would only exacerbate the burden. While these pieces did not render him immobile, they demanded an immense expenditure of energy. Yet, he had not yet completed the entire spiked set, as a crucial blueprint for the chest plate remained unattained. Zhou conducted a brief calculation. A single piece of spiked krill shell weighed approximately 2 kilograms, and to forge the entire spiked armor set, he would require 28 pieces of spiked krill shell, amounting to a staggering 56 kilograms. To his astonishment, that equated to around 112 gene. This weight calculation was alarming, especially since it did not include the chest plate. If the chest plate were factored in, the total might reach approximately 150 gene. Given that Zhou's own weight was merely around 130 gene, the weight of this spiked ensemble exceeded his own body weight. Clearly, there existed a strength limitation associated with donning this spiked armor. Opening his character's data panel, Zhou gazed at his meager strength score of 8 points. Feeling as though the prospect of utilizing the pest control voucher was a distant dream, he surmised that to wear the complete spiked armor set and move with ease, his strength would need to be at least 15 points, if not 20. However, he currently possesses only 8 points of strength, falling short by at least 7 points. The question of how to compensate for this deficit leaves him utterly perplexed. Is he to await the arrival of new creatures that could potentially augment his strength? Contemplating this notion, Zhou felt a throbbing headache. A 7-point disparity is not easily bridged. Even if he were to encounter new entities capable of enhancing his strength, it is improbable that he would gain the requisite 7 points all at once. After 6 days in this world, he has only encountered the spiny shrimp, a creature known to increase strength points. Thus, the aspiration to elevate his strength to 15 points appears unattainable in the short term, which is a source of great frustration for Zhou. Meanwhile, other survivors in the World Channel have already discovered that transporting seaweed yields additional treasure chests, erasing his prior advantage. Although his transformed Leviathan has consistently outperformed other survivors in terms of distance, the pace of their advancement largely hinges on the contents of their resource chests, turning this into a contest of fortune. Given that all participants have access to the same number of resource chests, Zhou does not believe he will emerge as the one with the most favorable luck. He must swiftly identify methods to maintain his lead over the other survivors. The steel-armored Leviathan Pest Control Voucher, being a dungeon, should provide access to some currently scarce resources, allowing him to stay ahead in development. No, wait. While Zhou has been preoccupied with maintaining his existing advantage, a sudden realization struck him, prompting him to hastily open his character attribute panel. The baseline attributes for an ordinary individual stand at 10 points. Zhou gazed at the hint nestled within the parentheses beside the character attribute panel, his eyes gleaming with realization. His strength had not yet reached the level of an average individual. In other words, could I enhance my strength points through training? Indeed, this presented a viable means to augment one's strength. However, it must be acknowledged that achieving such an increase through exercise requires persistent and prolonged effort. Alas, at least there exists a tangible goal, which is far more reliable than merely awaiting the appearance of creatures that could enhance my strength. The character attribute panel comprises 4 distinct values: intelligence, strength, constitution, and speed. This indicates that creatures within this realm, upon consumption, confer bonuses to these 4 attributes. No matter how fortunate one may be, it is improbable to encounter creatures that solely augment strength each time. Chapter 17. Creatures scurrying beneath the waves in pursuit of bolstering his strength through rigorous training. Zhou engaged in push-ups while awaiting the arrival of a supply crate. He set himself a target of completing 100 push-ups today, aware that his body was not capable of such a feat in one go. Thus, he resolved to start with 20. Yet, after merely 5 push-ups, he heard an unusual sound emanating from his elbow, as if it were bearing an undue burden. Ultimately, summoning nearly all his remaining strength, he managed to execute a meager 10 rather imperfect push-ups. How has my body weakened to such an extent? Zhou found it hard to believe, for he recalled a time in school when he could effortlessly perform 40 to 50 push-ups in one go. Now, even 10 felt like a near insurmountable challenge. Perhaps it is best to take a more gradual approach. Zhou understood that building strength could not be rushed. With perseverance, progress would naturally follow. Thus, he began with a set of 10 repetitions, taking intervals to rest before continuing. The sound of crashing waves echoed around him as he paused his training, standing on the wooden platform, awaiting the arrival of the supply crate. Soon, the esophageal diaphragm opened, and a rush of seawater flooded into the cavity of his stomach, causing the water's surface to gradually rise. Suddenly, something unknown darted swiftly beneath the surface, sending a spray of water into the air and leaving ripples in its wake. Zhou instinctively retreated into the shelter of the wooden platform, bending low to observe the water surface, where light danced upon the waves, searching for the shadow of a creature. Wasn't this the phase for acquiring the supply crate? Why would any creatures appear in the water? A grave expression crossed Zhou's face. He had initially believed that only during the feeding stage of the illusory Leviathan would creatures be drawn in by the seaweed. Now, it seemed that this phase of obtaining the supply crate could also see creatures enter, which was far from a favorable development. The beam of his headlamp cast a limited glow, allowing him to observe only the water's surface within a 3-meter radius. Yet even so, he could discern something darting swiftly beneath the illuminated water, vanishing in the blink of an eye. The creatures in the water appeared to be in a frenzied state, moving back and forth with great force, creating waves that rose several centimeters high. Zhou could occasionally hear the sound of tails slapping against the seawater. As the sea gradually recedes, the creatures within the water grow increasingly agitated, seemingly struggling to escape this confined space. With a splash, after a while, as the water completely withdraws, The sounds of fish thrashing against the ground emerge from the dark areas where the beam of the headlamp cannot penetrate. Only upon hearing this sound does Zhou muster the courage to rise and investigate the nature of the creature. His daring is inspired by the fact that this being has shown no inclination to attack. It merely swims back and forth in the water. Furthermore, judging by the sounds it makes against the ground, it suggests that this creature, having left the water, belongs to a type that cannot survive outside its aquatic habitat. Leaping off the wooden platform, he follows the sound's guidance, cautiously wielding the headlamp to illuminate the darkness. Suddenly, Zhou is blinded by a radiant flash. Could it be another luminescent creature? His first thought is that this being, much like the sunlit dinoflagellates, possesses the ability to emit light. Yet, upon reflection, this seems implausible, as the creature had not exhibited any luminescence while submerged, nor had it glowed in the shadowy regions untouched by the lamp's glow. From where, then, does this light originate? With a sense of curiosity swirling within him, Zhou shields his eyes with one hand to mitigate the glare, squinting to discern the creature. Soon, he observes a 1-meter-long luminous ribbon bouncing upon the ground, reminiscent of a fish stranded on the shore after emerging from the water. What on earth could this be? Zhou finds himself utterly perplexed by the nature of this being. While it appears to emit light, it remains invisible in the darkness, and yet, under the beam, it dazzles his sight. As Zhou pondered this, he suddenly paused and decided to adjust the direction of his headlamp, no longer directing it at the creature. By the residual glow of the lamp, he finally discerned the true nature of the being before him. It was a large fish, approximately 1 meter in length, resembling a shuttle in shape. The reason it had been so blinding when illuminated was due to its remarkably smooth skin, which reflected the light entirely. Upon realizing that the unknown entity was merely a fish, Zhou felt a wave of relief wash over him. A fish out of water posed no threat whatsoever. However, he refrained from attempting to catch the fish, as it was still quite sizable and had only just been removed from its aquatic environment. Its tail thrashed against the ground with a resounding slap, showcasing considerable power. The sight of that formidable tail conjured images from animations in Zhou's mind, where characters were struck by fish tails, and he certainly did not wish to experience such a fate. Knowing that the fish could not survive long out of water, he decided to wait until it exhausted itself before making his move to capture it. Thus, Zhou disregarded the large fish and turned his attention to searching for supply crates. Ding! Obtained wood X10, obtained stone X10, obtained sand X10. The first supply crate contained only materials, which Zhou promptly lifted and returned to the wooden platform. After placing the crate in the designated area for basic materials, he resumed his push-ups. About an hour later, the large fish finally succumbed to fatigue and ceased its flailing. Zhou immediately leaped down from the platform and approached the location of the fish. The mouth of the large fish opened and closed continuously, yet removed from the water. It clearly could not obtain even the slightest breath of oxygen, destined to slowly suffocate to death. Zhou effortlessly lifted the fish, which weighed approximately 20 to 30 kilograms. Its skin was as smooth as a mirror. In fact, it was a mirror, reflecting Zhou's handsome visage with remarkable clarity. The creatures of this world are truly wondrous. Gazing at his reflection, Zhou casually opened the biological compendium to explore the specifics of this fish. Mirror skin pike, length, 1 meter weight, 10 to 15 kilograms diet. Plankton description: its skin is as smooth as a mirror, shaped like a dart, and it moves through water with incredible speed, akin to an arrow in flight. A collision, even a minor one, could lead to bruising, while a severe impact might injure vital organs. The flesh is firm and springy, and the skin can be fashioned into diving suits. Goodness, this fish is no trivial matter. After reviewing the description, Zhou felt fortunate that he had constructed a wooden platform early on, distancing himself from the water's surface. Otherwise, the mirror skin pike's erratic movements beneath the water could have led to an unfortunate encounter. A collision in a sensitive area would be utterly disastrous. Chapter 18. Consuming fish flesh. Having examined the basic information about the mirror skin pike, Zhou discovered that it was indeed edible, implying that consuming its flesh could likely enhance his attribute points. This realization made Zhou feel somewhat apprehensive, as he desperately needed to augment his strength attribute. He fervently hoped that the mirror skin pike would provide him with a boost in strength. Thus, Zhou placed the fish upon the wooden platform, performing a ceremonial gesture while softly murmuring to himself. "Strength, strength, grant me strength." He murmured fervently until, with a sudden flourish, he raised his arms skyward and shouted aloud, resembling a fervent cultist. After this ritual, Zhou commenced the task of processing the mirror skin sturgeon with a sharp implement. At this juncture, the sturgeon, having been out of the water for too long, was unable to absorb oxygen and had succumbed to death. There was no need for Zhou to contemplate methods of killing it. He could simply proceed to skin it. Yet, gazing at the impeccably smooth fish skin, he found himself momentarily at a loss as to how to proceed, for he had never before engaged in the act of fish slaughter, fearing that he might mar the flawless surface. After some contemplation, Zhou devised two methods for skinning the fish. The first involved making an incision along the belly, akin to the conventional method of fish preparation. The second approach entailed making a circular cut behind the fish's head to peel the skin away, a technique that would preserve the integrity of the skin to the greatest extent. Ultimately, Zhou opted for the first method, and the reasoning was straightforward. He lacked the requisite skills and appropriate tools. Although he had never killed a fish, he had observed the process. Fish skin was notoriously difficult to remove, and the latter method seemed insurmountably challenging for him at this moment. Thus, Zhou began the skinning process using the first technique. The skin of the mirror skin sturgeon was remarkably tough, comparable in resilience to that of the anchorworm. Yet it paled in comparison to the exoskeleton of the sharp-spined shrimp. Nevertheless, Zhou was able to slice through it with a sharp implement. He proceeded with caution and at a slow pace, for the fish skin could potentially be fashioned into a diving suit. Although he was unaware of the suit's utility at present, he resolved to accumulate materials, confident that they would prove useful in the future. After approximately half an hour, Zhou had completely opened the abdomen of the mirror skin pike. The next task was to remove the skin. To Zhou surprise, the fish skin was not as difficult to peel off as he had anticipated. Although it required some effort, he managed to remove the entire skin in just 10 minutes. Quite impressive. In a buoyant mood, Zhou spread the fish skin out. It resembled a mirror, reflecting his clear visage. Satisfied, he nodded and stored the skin in his supply box. His gaze then shifted to the fish flesh, eager to consume it and discover any potential attribute enhancements. Zhou deftly sliced off a piece of fish meat. The flesh was peculiar, translucent and akin to the spiny shrimp meat, yet more transparent, resembling crystal, and under the light, it shimmered with silvery glimmers. After a moment of hesitation, he opened his mouth and placed the fish meat inside. After chewing, he found it devoid of any unpleasant taste. It lacked the sweetness of spiny shrimp meat. It was rather bland. Moreover, the fish flesh was overly firm, akin to chewing tasteless pork skin, rendering it not particularly palatable. Nevertheless, in pursuit of attribute points, Zhou persevered, consuming slice after slice. Finally, after devouring a third of the entire fish, the system notification chimed. At last, it rang out. "I was nearly unable to continue eating," Zhou lamented internally. Although the mirror skin pike measured a meter in length, its body was not particularly large, with a width of merely 10 centimeters. A third of the meat was hardly enough to satiate him, primarily due to the tastelessness of the fish flesh, and Zhou was also unaccustomed to eating raw meat. Ding! Consuming the skin of the mirror catfish has granted him 1 constitution and 1 speed. Incredible! It actually enhances 2 attributes, Zhou exclaimed, initially taken aback, followed by a look of astonishment. Though it was not the coveted strength points he had hoped for, a dual enhancement brought him considerable joy. Zhou promptly accessed his character attribute panel. Zhou normal human base, 10 intelligence, 10 strength, 8 constitution, 10 speed, 12 evaluation, a healthy individual with remarkable speed. Is this truly considered healthy? My strength has yet to reach the normal threshold, Zhou remarked with a smile, observing the evaluation below. After a brief contemplation, he deduced that the term healthy likely corresponds to the constitution value rather than the overall attribute score. However, he remained uncertain whether the effects of the mirror catfish's flesh would provide a single enhancement or multiple. Gazing at the remaining 2/3 of the fish, a sense of anticipation washed over him. Zhou naturally hoped for multiple attribute enhancements, even if strength points were not immediately required. Significant improvements in his other physical metrics could only serve him well. Nonetheless, at this moment, he found himself unable to consume the remaining third of the fish. resolving to await the evening to observe the results. After carefully storing the leftover fish, Zhou found himself with little to occupy his time. So he resumed his physical training. Perhaps due to the slight increase in constitution, he found doing push-ups considerably easier this time. Previously, completing 10 push-ups had been a grueling endeavor, often executed with poor form. Yet, this time around, while still challenging, he executed 10 push-ups with noticeably improved technique. Approximately an hour later, Zhou completed the 100 push-ups he had set for himself today, and it was time for the illusory Leviathan to consume the second supply crate. Upon learning that during the phase when the illusory Leviathan ingests the supply crate, creatures would also enter the stomach wall space, Zhou no longer remained as careless as before. Although the recently encountered mirror skin pike showed no aggression towards him, this did not imply that other creatures would behave similarly. Hence, Zhou donned all 4 pieces of the spiked armor. While these armors restricted his mobility, his primary focus on the wooden platform was defense. He feared ambush from unidentified creatures lurking in the darkness below. He could only ascertain whether these creatures posed a threat once the seawater receded and their forms became visible, at which point he would consider removing the spiked armor. Fortunately, the seawater that brought the supply crate did not harbor any creatures. Once the water had withdrawn, Zhou removed 3 pieces of the spiked armor, retaining only the spiked helmet. He then leaped from the platform to open the second supply crate of the day. Ding! Obtained a fragment of the illusory Leviathan's accelerated growth food illustration X1, 210. Once again, it was this food illustration which seemed quite significant for the illusory Leviathan. This illustration requires the collection of 10 fragments. Previously, Zhou had not been particularly concerned with this illustration, as he maintained a substantial advantage and felt no need to pursue further enhancement. Now that his advantage had diminished, the illustration that could expedite the growth of the illusory Leviathan had become exceedingly important. It appeared that he would need to gather information on it in the World Exchange Channel. Chapter 19. The production of fertilizer. Just as Zhou was about to send a message in the Global Communication Channel to gather information on the food recipes for accelerating the growth of the transmuted Leviathan, he received several private messages from Jiang Haitao. Thank you for the 3 spike krill and the spike helmet you gave me a couple days ago. Wenge. I traded those 3 spike krill just like you taught me, and I exchanged them for 6 loaves of bread and 6 bottles of mineral water, along with some basic materials. For now, I needn't worry about food. I'll just open a supply box and obtain a recipe. I'll send it to you. Please accept it. As Zhou finished reading these messages, Jiang Haitao sent in the recipe. Upon seeing its contents, Zhou's eyes brightened, and he promptly clicked to accept. This recipe was indeed timely. A broad smile spread across Zhou's face, for the recipe was for the production of fertilizer. Low-level fertilizer production recipe. Crafted in a compost bin, requires 5 hay and 5 transmuted Leviathan manure. However, upon reviewing the materials needed for this low-level fertilizer, Zhou's smile faltered. While he possessed both the compost bin and hay, where could he procure the manure of the transmuted Leviathan? The Leviathan excretes waste externally. How could he obtain the manure from its stomach? Was it possible to acquire the manure in the digestion pool? As this thought crossed his mind, Zhou suddenly recalled the schematics for the manure scoop he had obtained previously. It dawned on him that the manure scoop was intended for collecting the manure of the transmuted Leviathan. The smile that had momentarily faded returned to Zhou's face. He opened the schematics interface and, using 5 units of wood, crafted the manure scoop. After a burst of blue light, a manure scoop was fashioned. The wooden handle extended 3 meters, with a 30-centimeter diameter barrel attached at the end, specifically designed for the task of manure collection. The compost barrel had been prepared in advance. Zhou first added 5 portions of hay into the compost barrel before approaching the digestion pool, where he plunged the manure scoop into the liquid-filled depths. The 3-meter-long handle delved 2 meters into the digestion pool before encountering resistance. Zhou surmised that he had come upon the excrement of the phantasmal Leviathan. Gripping the handle with both hands, he scooped up a portion. Retrieving the manure scoop from the digestion pool, he found the barrel brimming with a viscous green substance, interspersed with strands of plant fibers. This was undoubtedly the excrement of the phantasmal Leviathan, he remarked with a hint of detachment as he dragged the scoop, laden with the manure, to the side of the compost barrel. The 3-meter handle and the 30-centimeter diameter barrel, filled to the brim with the heavy manure, proved quite burdensome. Zhou exerted considerable effort to pour the contents into the compost barrel. According to the formula for a basic fertilizer, 5 portions of phantasmal leviathan manure were necessary. If 1 barrel constituted a single portion, he would require 4 more. Thus, Zhou proceeded to extract 2 additional scoops of manure, depositing them into the compost barrel, thereby fulfilling the material requirements of the fertilizer formula. Standing before the compost barrel, now replete with manure and hay, he grimaced at the foul odor emanating from within. The stench had been tolerable from a distance, but now, in close proximity, it was quite overwhelming. Hastily, Zhou seized a lid nearby and covered the compost barrel. He pondered, uncertain of how to ascertain the successful creation of the fertilizer. In this world, many things lack specific indications. The growth cycles of crops are absent, as are the time required for the production of fertilizers, and the precise attributes to be added to shrimp and fish are not delineated in any compendium. All knowledge must be gleaned through personal experimentation. This low-grade fertilizer formula is exceptionally useful to me. However, I cannot accept it without reciprocation. Zhou sent a message to Jiang Haitao, accompanied by an algae oxygenator. Zhou wished to avoid incurring a debt of gratitude. If Jiang Haitao were to provide him with something of little value, he would accept it as a gesture of goodwill. Nevertheless, this low-grade fertilizer formula is a boon for his agricultural endeavors, and thus, he deemed it only fair to exchange it for an algae oxygenator. An algae oxygenator. Brother One, is this not a bit too precious? Jiang Haitao was well aware of the significant role of the algae oxygenator. With it, he could transport seaweed, aiding the leviathan's accelerated digestion and yielding additional resource crates, which are currently exceedingly rare. Jiang Haitao had initially planned to shamelessly request a trade for one from Zhou when upon his public sale the following day, but unexpectedly, Zhou had directly gifted him one. It's nothing. The formula you provided is of great importance to me as well. Thus, it is a fair exchange. Brother One, I scarcely know what to say. When I previously lacked food, you were the only one willing to trade with me, effectively saving my life. After that, you generously provided me with extra spiny shrimp and even equipped me. Brother One, I shall say no more. From now on, I shall follow you, handing over all the blueprints I acquire, merely hoping that you will allow me to cling to your coattails. Not at all, not at all. If you are willing, in the future, you may prioritize trading with me regarding items such as blueprints or recipes. Zhou did not fully embrace Jiang Haitao's overtures of camaraderie. As the saying goes, one can know a person's face, but not their heart, especially in a world where one cannot physically meet others. Despite having communicated with Jiang Haitao numerous times, and perceiving him as a rather simple-minded individual through their dialogues, Zhou still harbored a degree of wariness. Naturally, if Jiang Haitao were genuinely willing to provide him with blueprints in the future, Zhou would not neglect him. By the way, if you're transporting seaweed tomorrow, it would be best to take breaks periodically, as the oxygen produced by a single algal oxygenator may not suffice to sustain your continuous exertion. Before concluding their conversation, Zhou offered this reminder. Overall, he held a favorable impression of Jiang Haitao. His survival was advantageous for Zhou as well. Jiang Haitao did not inquire further and readily agreed. After ending the exchange with Jiang Haitao, Zhou prepared to send a message to the global communication channel, seeking fragments of the guide for the accelerated growth of the illusory Leviathan's food. However, another private message arrived. Brother Zhou, I am Cheng Yongming. I would like to arrange an exchange with you for an algal oxygenator in advance. Rest assured, I will ensure that Brother Zhou does not suffer any loss. I am willing to trade a precious blueprint with you. His words seemed to imply that Zhou was the one benefiting unduly. Zhou regarded Cheng Yongming's message with a faint smile. Although from Zhou's perspective, he indeed gained a significant advantage from the standpoint of others, the algae oxygenation chamber, under the conjecture proposed by Chan Xin, holds an importance that is certainly not inferior to that of the blueprints. After all, there exists a multitude of blueprint types, which can be categorized into useful and useless. For instance, the blueprint for a wooden bed is of little utility to Zhou. In the current scenario, where the supply and demand of algae oxygenation chambers are vastly imbalanced, the value of the wooden bed blueprint pales in comparison to that of the algae oxygenation chamber. I apologize, I only managed to create 2 due to insufficient materials, and I need one for myself. Hence I cannot trade, Zhou remarked, glancing at the remaining 12 algae oxygenation chambers. Chapter 20. The useless blueprint. I wonder what materials you lack, Brother Zhou. I can offer you what I have, one person inquired. Other materials are negotiable, but one of the required materials is seaweed. Currently, the Leviathan has entered the digestion phase, and there is no seaweed available, making it impossible to produce, Joan explained. Oh, I see. Since you have two, would you consider trading one to me? This blueprint is exceedingly rare, the other party proposed. Joan had been waiting for this very statement. He intentionally mentioned having two to inform Cheng Yongming that one was indeed available for sale. That won't do. I need it for myself. Joan naturally could not agree immediately, continuing with his strategy of feigned reluctance. Come now, brother Joan. The Leviathan has finished feeding, and there is no need to transport seaweed anymore. One algae oxygenation chamber would suffice for oxygen supply. Please, trade me one. This blueprint is truly quite scarce. Cheng Yongming has consistently emphasized the uniqueness of his blueprints, piquing Joan's curiosity. What kind of blueprints are they? Could you possibly share the details with me? Joan inquired. Well, Cheng hesitated. Perhaps it's best to let this matter rest. Since you are unwilling to reveal any information about your blueprints, despite claiming their rarity, it seems prudent for you to keep them to yourself. From Cheng Yongming's reaction, Joan surmised that the blueprints in his possession were of little value. However, Joan was not particularly concerned with their utility. He would collect anything that was not merely a duplicate. The previous spoon for dredging waste was a prime example. His persistent engagement with Cheng stemmed from the latter's apparent attempt to gain an advantage while portraying himself as the one benefiting from the interaction. Cheng aimed to enhance the perceived value of his blueprints while simultaneously fostering a closer rapport, insinuating that since he had allowed Zhou to benefit, perhaps they could forge a friendship and he could also reap some rewards in the future. This was merely a rhetorical strategy, inflating the significance of the worthless and magnifying the trivial into something grand, a tactic akin to pulling a fast one. Oh no, wait. Let me show you. This blueprint is truly invaluable, Cheng Yongming quickly insisted. He then sent the blueprint details to Joan, who opened the file only to find that it was not merely useless, but utterly worthless, a blueprint for cultivating seagrass. Joan was left speechless. Did seagrass even require cultivation? The quantities consumed daily by the Leviathan were measured in tons. Indeed, my brother Cheng Yongming, you are quite right. This blueprint is exceptionally unique. I suggest you keep it for your own collection. Alas, brother Joan, I am fully aware that the value of this blueprint pales in comparison to the algae oxygenation chamber, yet I find myself devoid of any other designs. This one has only just come to light. I earnestly hope that you might lend me your assistance by trading one algae oxygenation chamber for it. If you feel that the deal is inequitable, I am willing to offer a higher price, though I must confess I possess no further blueprints. Only a modest supply of basic materials. Since I have already presented the blueprint information to Joan, Cheng Yongming refrained from further boasting about his design. Such a worthless blueprint is evident to anyone, and persisting in the charade would jeopardize the transaction. But this blueprint truly holds no value, he lamented. Brother Zhou, I implore you. I previously mentioned that I would prioritize you for any future trades of blueprints. I have upheld my word, and I assure you that I will seek you out first when I acquire another design. Well, sigh. Very well. In light of our acquaintance in this unfamiliar world, I shall grant you this favor. As for the additional materials, they may be disregarded. Let us proceed with the trade of this blueprint. Ha, brother Zhou, you are truly magnanimous. I'm immensely grateful. I assure you that when I obtain another blueprint, you will be my first choice for trading. Subsequently, Joan and Cheng Yongming finalized their transaction, with Zhou when acquiring the blueprint for the seagrass planting box. He promptly accessed the system interface to review the materials required for its construction. Seagrass planting box blueprint requires stones, X20, seawater. The materials required for manufacturing are akin to those needed for the algae oxygen generator, with the addition of 10 stones, which currently serve no purpose. Joan has no intention of crafting it just to see its functionality. Instead, he resumes his efforts in collecting fragments. Collecting fragments for the Leviathan Transformation Growth Acceleration Food Codex. The price is negotiable. Upon sending this message, Joan ignited a flurry of discussions among the survivors, especially with the impending sale of the algae oxygen generator the following day, causing his every word and action to draw significant attention. What is this Leviathan Transformation Growth Acceleration Food Codex fragment? I have no idea. I've never encountered it. Judging by the name, it must be something that aids in the growth of the Leviathan transformation. Joan initially believed that by utilizing the World Communication Channel to gather fragments, he would swiftly acquire the 10 needed. However, after several hours, he had only managed to obtain a single fragment. Out of a million survivors in the world, only one fragment? Is it truly this rare? Zhou himself had found 2 fragments, presuming it would be relatively easy to collect them all. Could it be that the distance of my Leviathan transformation is affecting the probability of finding these items in supply boxes? After some contemplation, this seemed the only plausible explanation. With nothing else to occupy his time, Zhou awaited the arrival of the 3rd supply box for the day. During this period of anticipation, he decided to check on the compost bin to see if any fertilizer had been produced. However, as he attempted to lift the lid, he discovered that it appeared to be stuck as if adhered to the compost bin itself, stubbornly refusing to budge despite his efforts. After trying various methods, an epiphany suddenly struck Zhou. Once the fertilizer is ready, the lid will automatically open. Understanding this, Zhou felt quite pleased. Initially, he harbored some anxiety regarding the exact nature the fertilizer should take to be considered complete. However, now that he comprehended the underlying principles, his worries dissipated completely. After a while, the 3rd supply crate arrived. This time, there were no creatures in the water. Zhou opened the crate safely. Ding! Ironore extre. Alas! More ore. Zhou sighed, uncertain when these minerals would finally prove useful. Time was running short. With the acquisition of 3 supply crates complete, the illusory Leviathan was also nearing its resting phase. Zhou took out the remaining 2/3 of the mirror-scaled sturgeon meat and began to cut it into pieces for consumption. Due to the unpalatable nature of the sturgeon meat, Zhou did not intend to savor it slowly. He consumed it rapidly, nearly swallowing it after just a few chews. He quickly finished 1/3 of the fish meat, yet did not receive any notification of attribute points. It seemed that, like the spiked krill, he could not repeatedly gain attribute points. Zhou was not particularly surprised. He merely felt it was a pity to have wasted it. Gazing at the remaining 1/3 of the mirror-scaled sturgeon meat, he resolved to exchange it for a blueprint in the World Communication Channel. Mirror-scaled sturgeon meat grants a slight increase in constitution and speed, seeking to exchange for the spiked chestplate blueprint. The precise number of spiked armor pieces remains unknown to Zhou, yet it is certain that there is no breastplate among them. The mirror skin needlefish can enhance 2 attributes, making it exceedingly valuable. Even if someone intends to keep the blueprints for personal use, they must contemplate the dual attributes. After all, relying on external objects cannot surpass the fortification of oneself. Chapter 21. Successful Fertilizer Production. Mirror Skin Needlefish. How do you possess so many remarkable items, esteemed one? Are you not the protagonist endowed with an external system? Goodness! Upon your mention, it seems this esteemed individual has indeed been selling things we've never encountered before. Could there truly be an external system akin to those in novels? Esteemed one, I humbly seek your support. Consequently, there was no discussion regarding transactions. The subsequent messages were inundated with requests for support. Zhou found himself both amused and exasperated as he perused these messages, prompting him to shift the conversation. Cease your unrealistic musings. Do you truly believe this is a novel? An external system? Allow me to share a tangible fact. Today, I successfully created an algal oxygenation chamber and experimented with transporting seaweed. It indeed accelerated the digestion speed of the phantasmic Leviathan, and I obtained an additional resource box. Tomorrow, Zhou shall commence the sale of the algal oxygenation chamber, and these messages serve as a prelude. As expected, the moment Zhou revealed that the method of transporting seaweed was feasible, the communication channel erupted like thunder, with an overwhelming barrage of messages flooding in simultaneously. Incredible! The hypothesis regarding transporting seaweed actually works. I thought it was a ploy to deceive us. Why would they harm us? Think about it. Most of us are already lacking food and expending considerable energy. The rate at which we consume food will undoubtedly accelerate. If we cannot acquire additional supplies, will we not starve to death? Goodness, I find no fault in your reasoning. Could it be that this individual is allied with that person who previously proposed the seaweed transportation theory, now intentionally leading us to believe that the conjecture is feasible, thereby causing our demise? Brother, I believe you may be suffering from paranoia, and your reasoning seems rather flawed, jumping to conclusions without evidence. What? Am I suggesting something implausible? They have no familial ties to us. Why would they assist us? There must be something amiss. It is indeed a possibility, but as of now, There are no conflicting interests among us, making it unnecessary for us to plot against one another. Who knows? Perhaps these individuals are all psychologically disturbed. I perceive that you might be the one with a psychological issue. Zhou felt a throbbing headache. What was initially good news had been twisted into a conspiracy theory by these individuals. He was too weary to continue reading. The message had already been sent, and the Leviathan had entered a state of rest. Zhou prepared to sleep. Just as he lay down on the wooden platform, a private message arrived, requesting a trade for mirror-scaled sturgeon meat. At last, the blueprint for the spiked chest armor is in hand. Zhou let out a few joyous laughs. This blueprint represents the most crucial component of the entire spiked armor set, capable of safeguarding the entire upper body, which harbors the most vital organs. Without the protection of armor, Zhou felt an unsettling chill and absence of security. Suddenly, he reflected on the day's bountiful harvest. He had acquired a total of 12 blueprints, along with a formulation for fertilizer. Zhou reclined upon the wooden platform, gazing skyward, and accessed the blueprint interface to peruse all the designs he had collected over the past few days. The blueprint for the fishbone blade. Zhou exclaimed, springing to his feet with fervor. He rushed to the storage area, retrieving a silvery fishbone from one of the supply crates. This was indeed the fishbone of the mirror-scaled pike, measuring precisely 1 meter, ideal for crafting the fishbone blade. A smile graced Zhou's face after so many days. He finally possessed a legitimate weapon. Crafting. He opened the blueprint interface and clicked to produce the item. A surge of blue light enveloped the silvery fishbone, and moments later, the light dissipated, revealing a fully silver blade, with the fish's tailbone forming the handle, its spine shaping the blade, and the head constituting the tip, slightly wider at the tip and narrower along the blade, making it a perfect design for slicing. Swish, swish. Zhou wielded the blade, swinging it back and forth with ease. Henceforth, refer to me as the Silver Blade Master. In this moment, Zhou's youthful exuberance ignited, as he struck various heroic poses and uttered flamboyant declarations. Fortunately, the space around him was devoid of others, or he would have felt utterly mortified. After spending some time with the fishbone knife, Zhou contentedly put it away and then glanced at the watermelon and sweet potato seedlings. After a day's growth, both had begun to vine rapidly. They're growing quite swiftly, Zhou remarked with a cheerful smile. He then approached the compost bin, attempting to open the lid, but it remained stubbornly shut. I'll check again tomorrow, he decided. Today's achievements were already significant, and Zhou was in high spirits. The creation of fertilizer could wait. A night passed in silence, and upon waking, Zhou realized it was already the 7th day. Today was a momentous occasion. In the World Exchange Channel, numerous survivors began discussing the pricing of the algae oxygenator. I believe the algae oxygenator will cost at least 50 units of basic materials. What? Are you still half asleep? You think you can buy an algae oxygenator for just 50 units? Dream on. I fear the price won't be cheap. We might need to exchange blueprints. That's outrageous. Blueprints? How could everyone possibly have blueprints? You don't genuinely believe everyone can trade for an algae oxygenator, do you? The upper right corner of the World System channel indicates a total of 100 million people. Even if one person refrained from eating or drinking and produced 1 unit per second, making 100 million units would take nearly 3 years. I don't care. If the price is 50 units of basic materials, I would gratefully refer to you as my benefactor. If it's 200 units, I would respectfully call you a big shot. But if it's blueprints, sorry, I'll be up early tomorrow. Indeed. Zhou observed these messages with a faint smile before closing the World Exchange Channel. He was utterly unconcerned about the potential scorn from other survivors, for he had no intention of selling the algae oxygen generator at an exorbitant price. The prominent figures had already made arrangements. At present, the phantasmagorical Leviathan had just begun to stir, and there remained a considerable interval before the feeding phase commenced. Zhou cast a glance at the melon vines and sweet potato tendrils, noting that the night had stretched considerably longer. He wondered whether the fertilizer had been prepared. Approaching the compost bin, he reached out to lift the lid, which came off with surprising ease. As soon as he opened it, a flurry of dark green manure pellets erupted from within, startling Zhou, who instinctively recoiled. Almost immediately, a notification chimed in his mind. Ding! Obtained low-grade fertilizer X10, which can shorten the growth time of crops by 10. Each crop may utilize it only once. Upon hearing this, Zhou Wen's face lit up with delight as he surveyed the pellets scattered across the platform, resembling heaps of cow dung. Without hesitation, he gathered them up and stored them in his empty supply box. This was indeed a valuable find. Although the time reduction was modest at only 10%, it was certainly better than nothing. Chapter 22. Selling the algae oxygen generator after securing all 8 fertilizer pellets in the supply box. Zhou Wen placed it aside and picked up 2 of the pellets from the ground, making his way to the small planting box. Each pellet was roughly the size of a fist, dark green in hue, with a texture akin to mud, emanating a foul odor. However, due to the processing, the stench was not as overpowering as before. Unsure of the precise method of application, he decided to experiment by placing the fertilizer pellets into the soil of the small planting box. Upon contact with the soil, the fertilizer clump instantly melted into a rich green liquid, akin to a snowball encountering flames, permeating the earth below. This signified successful fertilization, and it was quite convenient. Zhou Wen smiled with satisfaction and applied a clump of the fertilizer as well. He then fetched 2 bottles of mineral water, pouring them into 2 small planting boxes. The watermelon had been sown on the 4th day, while the sweet potato was planted on the 5th. At the time of planting, only half a bottle of water had been used for each, and now, on the 7th day, both the watermelon and sweet potato vines had grown significantly. Clearly, half a bottle would not suffice. A full bottle was necessary. However, fresh water seemed to be in short supply. Zhou Wen glanced at the 2 empty plastic bottles in his hands, and then turned to see the remaining 7 bottles of mineral water. Presently, he was not overly concerned about his drinking water situation. If necessary, he could exchange algae oxygen tanks for mineral water. Yet, if he continued to irrigate his crops exclusively with mineral water, expanding his farming endeavors would prove challenging. Currently, mineral water could only be obtained through the opening of resource boxes, and luck played a crucial role in this acquisition. This reality rendered the bulk trading of mineral water unfeasible. After all, fresh water could not yet be produced independently. Given that fresh water is intrinsically linked to life, everyone would prioritize its storage, only trading any surplus. Never mind, I'm overthinking. I do not have the space to create additional small planting boxes at this moment. The wooden platform constructed by Zhou Wen occupies merely 6 square meters. 2 small planting boxes consume 2 square meters. A compost barrel occupies 1 square meter, and the remaining space is taken up by storage boxes, leaving only his sleeping area. The algal oxygenation tank, fashioned from stone, is securely placed below, alleviating concerns of being swept away by seawater. The dung scoop, occupying minimal space, is positioned horizontally near the wall of the platform. Presently, despite his desire to cultivate more land, there is insufficient space available for planting. As for expanding the wooden platform, that is out of the question. The wall area is already limited, and any enlargement would hinder the feeding of the transforming Leviathan. The 180-ton baby needs to grow swiftly, Zhou Wen murmured to himself as he opened the biological encyclopedia within the world system, flipping to the first page, eager to see if the transforming Leviathan had grown after all these days. Age, 7 days stage, neonatal length, 35 meters weight, 200 tons diet, algae feeding method, filter feeding evaluation, a 200-ton baby. It has grown 5 meters, exhibiting a commendable growth rate of approximately 1 meter per day. Today is just beginning, so it cannot be counted as a full day. In essence, it has grown 5 meters in 6 days, a growth rate that surpasses expectations. While growth speed is crucial, the fragments required for accelerating the Leviathan's growth are alarmingly scarce. Zhou Wen currently possesses only 3 fragments, making it quite challenging to gather more in the short term. He anticipates that once the algal oxygenation tank is sold in a few days and some individuals manage to open 3 storage boxes in a day, the fragments will likely increase. Zhou Wen spoke softly as the sound of surging seawater echoed within his esophagus, signaling the Leviathan's transition to its feeding phase. Hastily, he donned 4 pieces of spiked armor and grasped a 1-meter-long fishbone knife, preparing for any imminent dangers. The waves rushed into the gastric cavity with a crashing sound. Zhou Wen approached the small cultivation box, utilizing the illumination from the sunlit orbs and his own headlamp to expand his vision in the enveloping darkness. He crouched down, contracting his chest and abdomen, with the fishbone knife held horizontally across his chest to shield his unarmored upper body. After a brief moment of waiting, reassured by the absence of any aquatic creatures in the water, he let out a slight sigh of relief. He opened the system's blueprint interface and began crafting an oxygen-generating algae tank, only to discover that he had merely 10 pieces of stone remaining. Originally, he had 210 pieces of stone, but after creating 20 algae tanks yesterday, only 10 remained. Undeterred, Zhou retrieved 10 portions of spiked krill meat from his supply box and proceeded to trade for stone in the trading channel. Due to the prevalence of spiked krill among many survivors, the value of its meat had significantly diminished. However, weighing 3 to 4 pounds, it still retained some worth. Trading each portion of spiked krill meat for 20 pieces of stone proved feasible. Before long, Zhou successfully acquired 200 pieces of stone through trade. Combined with the 10 pieces he already possessed, he was able to craft a total of 30 tanks, including the 9 remaining from the previous day. The oxygen-producing algae tanks that are to be sold today have been completed, occupying 1/3 of the stomach space. Zhou must sell these tanks before the Leviathan of Illusion feeds for the second time. Once the tide recedes, Zhou can ascertain that this feeding does not involve aggressive creatures, and he begins to announce in the global exchange channel. You all must have been waiting for quite some time. I shall not waste words. I am now commencing the sale of algae oxygen tanks, with a total of 20 units available each day. Why only 20 units? Indeed, that seems rather insufficient. I had anticipated that the algae oxygen tanks would not be easily traded by everyone. I initially thought I could sell 100 each day, but it turns out to be merely 20. Are you deliberately selling so few, hoping to raise the price? It appears he desires to outpace us all. By selling too many, he fears we might surpass him, hence the limited quantity. After revealing the daily sales limit, the survivors in the global exchange channel erupted in discontent, as the number was undeniably too low. Everyone, please remain calm. I am not intentionally offering such a scant amount. It is simply unfeasible for me to increase the quantity. The algae oxygen tanks, as the name suggests, require algae for their manufacture. The seaweed consumed by the Leviathan of Illusion is one of the essential materials. If I were to produce them in large quantities, it would deplete a significant amount of seaweed, adversely affecting the growth of the Leviathan of Illusion. In this world, the Leviathan of Illusion is our very foundation. I ask you all, if you were in my position, would you be willing to compromise? Upon being questioned by Zhou, a multitude of survivors who had been fervently requesting an increase in quantity ceased their messages. However, a few exceedingly selfish individuals persisted in urging Zhou to augment the production. Zhou, disregarding these pleas, firmly recognized that the algae oxygenation device was his creation, placing the initiative firmly in his hands. Should everyone insist on compelling him to manufacture in excess, thereby jeopardizing his interests, he would simply refrain from selling, leaving no one with access to the algae oxygenation device. I understand the urgency and empathize with your sentiments, he stated. While I cannot provide sufficient quantities, I assure you I will offer a fair price. What price? Came an inquiry. We hope that you, as a distinguished individual, might consider our shared suffering in this world and keep the price reasonable. Chapter 23. The burden of excess supplies given that increasing the quantity was no longer feasible. The survivors could only hope for a modest price, offering them at least a glimmer of hope. Rest assured, I am aware of your hardships. I plan to trade 1 blueprint per device, Zhou announced. Upon hearing his intention to trade blueprints, the communication channel erupted in chaos, with participants hurling insults at Zhou's lineage. However, he abruptly shifted his tone. Nevertheless, blueprints are exceedingly scarce and contingent upon luck. Thus, trading with blueprints is not quite suitable. I have decided to engage in trades with basic materials instead. How many basic materials? The survivors in the communication channel grew animated at the prospect of trading with basic materials, eagerly inquiring about the required quantities. It is indeed a challenging time for everyone. The quantity of oxygen-producing algae tanks I have for sale is rather limited. In order to provide everyone with an opportunity to trade, the first algae oxygen tank requires merely 100 units of basic materials. Goodness, what a benevolent soul. I want one. I also desire one. All the survivors are clamoring to purchase, and with such limited availability, it is naturally a case of first come, first served. Everyone, please hold on. The 100 units of basic materials come with certain conditions. Of these, 40 must be wood, 30 must be stone, and the remaining 30 can be of any other type. You may also substitute complete mantis shrimp shells, with one shell equating to 10 units of basic materials. Zhou, when currently faces considerable consumption of wood and stone, thus prioritizing the procurement of these two essential materials. The acquisition of shrimp shells is aimed at crafting spiked armor, which requires 10 shells, and it is anticipated that these armors will sustain damage. Relying solely on a few mantis shrimp ensnared in the daily seaweed is undoubtedly insufficient. Hence, purchasing directly from other survivors who have encountered mantis shrimp is the most expedient approach. I possess all these materials. I wonder when the esteemed seller will commence trading. Trading will begin shortly. To ensure fairness, I shall directly list the items in the trading channel. Moreover, since today marks the inaugural sale of the algae oxygen tanks, I shall forego a portion of my own interests and increase the total to an additional 10 units, making it 30 in total. As for whether everyone will succeed in their trades, it shall depend on the swiftness of their hands. Once Zhou, when finished speaking, he promptly listed all 30 algae oxygenation tanks. However, just as they appeared in the global trading channel, the transaction information vanished in an instant. In a heartbeat, all 30 tanks were snapped up, and a dazzling array of blue light flickered before Zhou Wan, as a plethora of basic materials materialized before him. Goodness, that was remarkably swift. The pace of the transactions astonished Zhou Wan. He had barely clicked on the system's blue screen to send his transaction information when it had already concluded. Ha! I managed to snag one. Tremble, mere mortals. What has flashed? I swear, I couldn't even catch a glimpse before it was gone. Beasts, what is your hand speed? This is outrageous. I had my hand poised on the trading channel well in advance, ready to click the moment the information appeared, yet it vanished in the blink of an eye. Damn it! Within the global communication channel, joyous laughter mingled with frustrated exclamations from those who had missed out. Zhou Wan chuckled to himself as he glanced a few times before preparing to close the communication channel and tally the basic materials he had just acquired. Big boss, you mentioned that the first tank requires 100 units of basic materials. How many will the second one need? The second tank does not require basic materials for trading. It can only be exchanged for blueprints, and it must be done via private message. Huh, this is quite a disparity, isn't it? Indeed, big boss. Please be generous. Let the second tank also require 100 units of materials. Yes, 100 basic materials is indeed a considerable amount. Surely, you stand to gain from this price. Subsequently, a multitude of survivors began to pressure Zhou Wan morally, urging him to sell the second unit at the same price of 100 basic materials. Zhou Wan, upon reading these messages, wore a sly smile. Very well, I shall continue to be a good person. The second unit will also be priced at 100 basic materials. Simply message me for the transaction. You're a great person. Incredible. I am firmly holding on to the big shot's coattails. Not even Jesus can deter me. I assure you. The global communication channel erupted with jubilation, as everyone rejoiced at the prospect of acquiring a second algae oxygen generator at a bargain. However, Zhou Wan soon followed up with another message. Nonetheless, I will only be selling 20 algae oxygen generators each day. Repeat purchases will certainly consume part of this limited quantity, so those who have yet to secure one must bear with it. Upon the release of this news, nearly all survivors who had not obtained the algae oxygen generator became infuriated. I believe the second unit should require a blueprint for the transaction. This pricing is exceedingly reasonable. Do not heed the words of those who are merely attempting to morally manipulate you for their gain. Indeed, even a single blueprint seems undervalued. The algae oxygen generator's utility includes the potential for additional resource boxes. The second unit should rightfully be priced at 2 blueprints for a fair exchange. Those individuals are indeed selfish, constantly seeking to exploit the advantages of the benefactor. The benefactor's first algae oxygenator was priced at a mere 100 units of basic materials, which already provided immense benefits to everyone. Yet, they audaciously desire to continue capitalizing on the second unit. How disgraceful. These individuals are nothing short of beasts, lesser than even the most base creatures. The global exchange channel erupted into a heated dispute between those who acquired the first algae oxygenator and those who did not. Spurred by Zhou Wan's message, Zhou Wan observed their quarrel quietly, a smirk playing on his lips as he transformed into a figure of mockery. After watching the exchange of insults for a while, it became evident that those who had successfully obtained the first algae oxygenator were far too few, tilting the situation heavily in one direction. Ultimately, the pricing for the second unit remained based on the trade of blueprints. Zhou Wan could only accept this price with great embarrassment. having declined 3 times, yet being persistently thwarted by the eager survivors. In the end, he had no choice but to acquiesce. Once the matter surrounding the algae oxygenator concluded, Joan began to tally the quantity of basic materials acquired through trade. He had amassed 200 units of wood, 900 units of stone, 60 units of spiny shrimp shells, and 100 units each of sand, dirt, and hay. Goodness, this is an overwhelming amount of basic materials. I scarcely have space to store it all. Reflecting on this, Joan utilized an empty supply box to collect these materials, with each box accommodating 100 units. With 3 supply boxes per day over 6 days, in addition to the initial supply box, he had a total of 19 boxes. Ultimately, it became apparent that these materials could not all be stored within the supply boxes. As stones cannot be swept away by the sea, Joan decided to cease collecting them, opting instead to gather other materials while stacking the stones in a corner. Chapter 24. The Great Battle of Course. The stones were merely placed temporarily in the corner, as they occupied too much space. Once he acquired 3 supply boxes today, he would pack the stones away. However, with an increasing abundance of materials, he would soon find himself devoid of storage. The thought of continuously selling 20 oxygen-producing algal tanks, which would yield a significant influx of basic materials daily, left him somewhat vexed. The spiny shrimp shells were sufficient for the time being. Perhaps he could use empty supply boxes as substitutes tomorrow. This was merely a stopgap solution, addressing the issue of excessive materials without offering a true remedy. After all, supply boxes also require space, each approximately the size of a shoebox. As their quantity increased, the lack of room would remain an issue. The constraints of his storage capacity were simply too restrictive. He would deal with future matters when the time came. Presently, Joan could not conceive a viable solution. If all else failed, he could exchange these basic materials for metal ore in the trading channel. Currently, the price for metal ore was 10 units of basic materials for 1 unit of ore. Although metal ore held little utility at present, it would undoubtedly become an essential resource in the future. Thus, stockpiling it posed no immediate problem. Due to the intertwining of trading and clearing basic materials, he had no time to transport the seaweed consumed by the Leviathan during its initial feeding. He decided to wait until the conclusion of its second feeding to move everything at once. Today, he traded 60 spiny shrimp shells, utilizing 10 shells and 20 cloth pieces to craft the spiny chest plate. Goodness, it is rather heavy. Joan raised the spiked chest plate with both hands, gauging its weight to be approximately 40 pounds. Regardless of its heft, he had no choice but to don it, as it would at least provide some protection for his body. Once he fully adorned the spiked chest plate, he was acutely aware of the overwhelming heaviness, feeling utterly fatigued merely from standing. Currently, he was clad in 5 pieces of gear: the spike helmet, spiked chest plate, spiked groin guards, spiked leg guards, and spiked boots, totaling a weight of 124 pounds. Though he could still manage to move, each motion drained him of vitality at an alarming rate. Oh, how burdensome, he sighed, deciding to lie down on the wooden platform to conserve his energy, planning to rise again during the second feeding. A few minutes later, the Leviathan began its second feeding. Joan attempted to rise from his supine position, but his upper body was too heavy and his underdeveloped abdominal muscles struggled to support him, rendering him unable to sit up. Left with no alternative, he braced himself on the ground, gradually shifting into a squatting position. It appeared that in addition to push-ups, sit-ups would need to be incorporated into his regimen. Gripping the fishbone knife in his hand, he pondered silently. At that moment, the esophageal diaphragm opened, and a torrent of seawater surged into the cavity of his stomach. Joan steeled himself, scanning the water's surface with the beam of his headlamp. Suddenly, the flowing water erupted violently, revealing a flesh-colored, elongated body that sent shivers down his spine, illuminated by the light. The anchorworm. Joan's heart raced. Terror etched upon his face. The anchorworm had nearly claimed his life before, and the thought of it still sent chills through him. Joan exhaled a deep breath, a wave of fear surging forth once again, causing his hand gripping the fishbone knife to tremble involuntarily. Fortunately, this time he was illuminated by the glow of a headlamp, preventing a recurrence of the previous incident when darkness had engulfed him, rendering him blind to his surroundings. This marked his second encounter with the anchorhead worm, compounded by his prior experience in vanquishing one. Although trepidation still lingered in his heart, his body did not succumb to the same paralysis as before. Joan remained crouched on the wooden platform, the fishbone knife poised defensively before him, silent as a shadow, awaiting the retreat of the tide. Time flowed slowly, and the water within the confines of his stomach gradually rose, inching closer to the level of the platform, until the esophageal diaphragm sealed, ceasing the influx of seawater. With the Leviathan's second feeding concluded, the saline fluid within his stomach would soon be expelled. Gently, Zhou raised a hand to wipe away the beads of sweat cascading from his forehead to his lashes. His strength was waning rapidly. The weight of his spiked armor felt burdensome, and the strain of maintaining a crouched position exerted immense pressure on his muscles. Suddenly, with a resounding splash, the previously tranquil surface of the water erupted, as four claw-like appendages resembling anchors, armed with menacing mandibles, lunged from beneath the platform. Seizing Zhou's head with a vice-like grip, little did he anticipate that the anchorhead worm would choose this precise moment to attack, and encumbered by his heavy armor. He had no time to rise or react, finding himself ensnared by the four deadly claws. Although Zhou was initially startled by the sudden attack, he quickly regained his composure. The assault from the anchor-headed worm was reminiscent of the previous encounter, targeting his head once more. The three sharp spikes atop his helmet once again thwarted the creature's assault. Without a moment's hesitation, Zhou sprang to his feet, wielding the fishbone knife with fervor, delivering a powerful strike to the worm's tentacle-like body. This weapon proved far superior to the spikes, as the blade sank halfway into the creature, crimson blood gushing forth, eliciting a pained shriek from the worm's head above him. Undeterred, Zhou swung the fishbone knife again, intent on cleaving the anchor-headed worm in two. Suddenly, a resounding explosion echoed across the water surface. Zhou's heart raced at the sound, causing his swinging knife to falter as a sense of foreboding washed over him. Just as he was about to redirect his headlamp to investigate, something clamped tightly around his thigh. A powerful tug followed, catching him off guard. He had been locked in a stalemate with the worm above, his focus entirely elsewhere. The sudden force disrupted his balance, and with a heavy thud, Zhou crashed onto the wooden platform. Weighing a total of 254 pounds, armored and all, he struck the surface with a dull thump. The creature that had ensnared his leg seemed intent on dragging him into the depths, yet it struggled against Zhou's considerable weight, unable to move him an inch. Just as Zhou exhaled in relief, the anchor-headed worm gripping his head began to drag him beneath the water, pulling him up and down with equal force from both sides. In a horizontal position, Zhou was submerged. Splash! His body plunged into the water, sending up a massive spray and creating ripples that radiated outward. As he was pulled underwater, Zhou was filled with dread. Although he had held his breath before hitting the water, preventing him from choking, he had not had the opportunity to catch his breath in the ensuing panic. His heart raced as the oxygen within him rapidly depleted, and he began to feel the effects of suffocation. With both his head and legs ensnared, he found himself unable to surface in the nearly 1 meter deep water. Time passed slowly, and the sensation of asphyxiation intensified. In this dire predicament, Zhou resolved to fight back. Summoning every ounce of strength, he reached for the body of the anchor-headed worm with his left hand, while wielding a fishbone blade in his right to cut at the creature. If he could swiftly slay the worm that held his head, he might have a chance to rise to the surface. Chapter 25. Relentless restrained Zhou began to slice at the anchor-headed worm with urgency and ferocity. Perhaps the creature was severely injured. After only 2 cuts, it released its grip on his head. A surge of joy flooded his heart, and the will to survive compelled him to discard the fishbone blade. With renewed determination, he vigorously flailed his arms, gradually bringing his body back to the surface. He gasped for air. Zhou gasped for the precious oxygen within the confines of his stomach. His movements so exaggerated that his body seemed to contract and expand in unison. Yet, before he could catch his breath, the creature, ensnaring his legs forcefully, submerged him once more. Gulp, gulp. Caught off guard, Zhou inadvertently swallowed several mouthfuls of seawater, the brine choking his lungs and inducing great discomfort. He thrashed his arms desperately, striving to break the surface, but just as he managed to cough, he was dragged down again. Zhou bobbed up and down in the water, continuously flailing his arms in an attempt to stay afloat. Fortunately, the creature gripping his thigh appeared to lack the strength to maintain its hold for an extended period, pausing after pulling him a certain distance underwater. This provided Zhou with a fleeting opportunity to catch his breath, and he soon deduced that the creature ensnaring his leg was likely an anchorworm. Realizing this brought a small measure of relief. As long as another anchorworm did not launch an attack against him, he could endure a stalemate with the one clinging to his thigh. He merely needed to wait for the tide to recede, at which point he could retaliate. In truth, with the spiked armor adorning his body, the anchorworm was incapable of inflicting harm upon him, not due to the armor's hardness, but because its myriad spikes effectively countered the anchorworm's advances. Yet, submerged and deprived of air, he found himself utterly helpless. At this moment, the water surface began to gradually descend. Zhou discerned the rhythm of the anchorworm's tugging at his thigh, just as it was about to pull him underwater again. He held his breath in anticipation. When the anchorworm's strength waned, he swiftly surfaced to exhale. As the water level descended further, the pulling force of the anchor-headed worm diminished correspondingly. Without the buoyancy of the water to aid it, the anchor-headed worm could no longer drag Zhou along. Furthermore, after a prolonged stalemate with Zhou in the water, it now lacked the energy to move, its anchor-like pincers still firmly gripping Zhou's thigh. Directing the beam of his headlamp towards his thigh, Zhou discovered that the anchor-headed worm was indeed thwarted by the sharp spines of his armor, preventing it from accessing its mouthparts. This revelation allowed him to finally relax. With the assurance of his safety, an overwhelming sense of fatigue washed over him, as if his body had suddenly lost all strength, collapsing onto the ground, incapable of rising for a moment. Just moments ago, clad in the heavy spiked armor, he had struggled in the water for a significant duration. Had it not been for the adrenaline surge triggered by life-and-death circumstances, he would have been unable to exert such effort. Now that the perilous threat of drowning had dissipated, he felt every muscle and bone in his body groan in protest. A profound wave of drowsiness enveloping him. His eyelids felt unbearably heavy, compelling him to succumb to sleep. Suddenly, a resounding slap echoed throughout the confines of his stomach. As Zhou removed his spiked helmet and delivered a forceful slap to his own face, the pain sharp and acute. The sting from that self-inflicted blow momentarily jolted him into alertness, and he hastily donned the spiked helmet once more, swiveling the headlamp in search of the injured anchor-headed worm he had previously wounded. To his astonishment, upon glancing at the creature, he was utterly invigorated. The wounded anchor-headed worm was sprawled on the ground, voraciously consuming the blood of the transformed Leviathan. Goodness gracious! Zhou let out a startled cry, fueled by an inexplicable surge of strength, as he abruptly sprang to his feet. He quickly retrieved the fishbone dagger he had discarded during his struggle against drowning and, with swift and decisive strikes, dispatched the leech-like anchorworm clinging to his leg. He then approached the blood-sucking anchorworm with urgency, delivering several swift blows until it lay lifeless before him. The tiny sunball creature might have been tolerable in its blood-sucking, but the sheer size of this anchorworm rendered such actions utterly intolerable. Zhou, brandishing the fishbone dagger, glared fiercely at the severed head of the anchorworm. With utmost caution, he pried away the anchorworm's claw that had affixed itself to the stomach wall. Fortunately, the minuscule barbs on the claw inflicted minimal damage, leaving only shallow wounds that would not jeopardize the integrity of the Leviathan's stomach. Just as Zhou began to breathe a sigh of relief, he noticed blood seeping from his stomach, a stark indication that this was not the anchorworm's blood. Removing the anchorworm's head revealed a tennis ball-sized, circular wound on the stomach wall. "Damn it!" Zhou exclaimed in frustration, kicking the severed head aside. The size of the wound was clearly indicative of a bite from the anchorworm's circular mouth. How on earth can I stop the bleeding? He pondered anxiously, watching the blood continue to ooze from the circular injury. The significance of the Leviathan to him could not be overstated. He could not afford to let any harm come to it. Yet, he found himself lacking the necessary tools for staunching the bleeding. Medical bandages were impractical for the stomach wall. Then it struck him, sunball creatures. Zhou was suddenly struck by inspiration, recalling the use of sunlight ball worms to staunch bleeding. Without hesitation, he shed his spiked chest armor, ascended the wooden platform, and captured a sunlight ball worm. He hoped it would work. Zhou placed the sunlight ball worm over the wound, and to his astonishment, its 4 delicate tentacles firmly adhered to the surrounding stomach wall, sealing the wound with precision. It was a triumph. Zhou felt a surge of joy. Although this injury was trivial for the colossal, shape-shifting Leviathan, residing within its belly naturally compelled him to assist in halting the bleeding. With all crises resolved, An overwhelming wave of fatigue washed over him once more. Yet he could not afford a rest, as the Leviathan's feeding phase had yet to conclude. Summoning his last reserves of strength, he hoisted the spiked chest armor onto the wooden platform and donned it. Regardless of the circumstances, it was imperative to wear protective gear. Though the armor was cumbersome, his recent encounter with the two anchorhead worms, from which he emerged unscathed and even managed to counterattack, underscored the armor's significance. Zhou Wen also made a pivotal decision. During the Leviathan's feeding process, he would refrain from unnecessarily observing the surface of the water. Following his near-drowning experience, he realized the futility of his previous fixation on the water's movements. During the intervals when seawater surged into the stomach space and receded, he could simply conceal himself and wait until the water had withdrawn before examining whether any creatures had entered the stomach space. Thus, devoid of seawater, Zhou Wen would not be dragged into the depths nor struggle amidst the waves, even if beset by marine creatures. Chapter 26 returns. As for where to conceal himself, it was only natural to seek refuge behind the stone-crafted algae oxygenator. Previously, when confronted by the anchor-headed worm in the water, he had stood behind the algae oxygenator, effectively thwarting the possibility of an underwater assault. Now, Zhou Wen merely needed to elevate the algae oxygenator onto the wooden platform and position it at the edge, creating a barrier akin to a wall against potential attacks from aquatic beings. He pondered whether there existed blueprints for a dwelling. If he could construct a house, he could take shelter within when seawater surged into the gastric cavity, thus ensuring greater safety. As these thoughts meandered through his mind, he utilized the system interface to relocate the algae oxygenator from beneath the wooden platform, placing it according to his design at the platform's periphery. Since Chun Xin had previously traded him an algae oxygenator, he was left with but one. Ordinarily, having one would suffice during the Leviathan's feeding phase. However, he found himself utterly fatigued, lacking the energy to transport seaweed. Moreover, the feeding phase of the Leviathan was yet to conclude, leaving the possibility of aggressive creatures infiltrating the gastric cavity at any moment. He could only wait until the feeding phase was entirely over before he could commence moving the seaweed. I cannot sleep, I cannot sleep. Zhou Wen yawned incessantly, his entire being enveloped in drowsiness. To stave off slumber, he pinched his thigh with vigor, yet the effect was hardly notable. Ultimately, Zhou Wen decided to indulge in a can of fruit to replenish some of the energy he had expended. With a crisp sound, he opened the can, revealing a delightful citrus medley within. The segments were tender, swimming in a luscious syrup. Rather than delving in with his hands, he opted to savor the syrup directly. The sweet and tangy liquid danced upon his palate, invigorating his weary senses, and he chose not to rush through the can, sipping slowly to maintain his appetite and stave off his drowsiness. After a while, the Leviathan once again commenced its feeding as seawater flowed into the gastric cavity. Zhou Wen took refuge behind the algae oxygenator, accessing the system interface to construct an additional oxygenator using the blueprints. Now, two algae oxygenators stood side by side along the edge of the wooden platform, significantly constraining Zhou Wen's sleeping space. Initially, he had only 2 square meters of sleeping area on his 6 square meter platform. With the addition of the 2 oxygenators, he was left with merely 1 square meter, which felt rather cramped. Disregarding the aquatic environment, Zhou Wen continued to enjoy his canned oranges while concealed behind the algae oxygenator, remaining undisturbed until the entire feeding phase concluded without incident. Once he finished the can, and after a considerable period of rest, Zhou Wen felt revitalized. He carefully stowed away the tin can and peered out from behind the algae oxygenator, illuminating the surroundings with his headlamp, finding no signs of large creatures. During the earlier feeding phase, he also had not detected any noises of activity, indicating that no creatures had entered the gastric cavity during the subsequent feedings. However, for the sake of safety, Zhou Wen donned his spiked armor and leapt down from the wooden platform. He traversed the kelp piles several times, further assuring himself that no aggressive creatures lurked within, before finally shedding the cumbersome spikes of his armor and beginning to transport the seaweed. 2 hours later, Zhou Wen had managed to relocate all the seaweed. The duration of this task was somewhat prolonged. Previously, he had been pulled underwater by 2 anchorhead worms, exhausting himself in the process. Without the luxury of rest, his body remained in a state of fatigue. At last, he could indulge in a moment of respite. Zhou Wen reclined on the remaining half-meter wide, 2-meter long wooden platform, fully embracing relaxation. He had approximately 3 hours of rest ahead, yet he dared not succumb to sleep. Without an alarm, there was no guarantee he would awaken in 3 hours. In roughly that time frame, the Leviathan would materialize to consume the supply crate, and the supply crate stage had become perilous. Should he encounter a dangerous creature while asleep, it would be impossible to fathom how his demise would occur. In a bid to stave off slumber, Joan opted to open the World Communication Channel to see what others were discussing. Geneva, refund us. Do you deserve our trust? Huh, what is happening? Joan found himself bewildered. Upon opening the World Communication Channel, he discovered many were venting their ire at him. After perusing their messages, he finally grasped the reason for their grievances. The algae oxygen chamber is utterly ineffective. I just finished transporting the seaweed and felt breathless, nearly succumbing to asphyxiation. Is this true? Many of us have yet to complete our transactions. Are you attempting to deceive us, perhaps in hopes of acquiring a second unit? What he says is indeed true. I have also traded for an algae oxygen generator and transported seaweed. After moving the seaweed, I experienced difficulty breathing, feeling as though I were on the brink of death. But I've only just begun to recover. Scammer, wasn't it stated that with the algae oxygen generator, we need not worry about oxygen depletion? As expected, none of these so-called experts are trustworthy. They're clearly intent on causing us harm. Scammer, come forth and provide an explanation. Indeed, we demand the return of our 100 basic materials and compensation. Refund. Refund. This is absurd. It is truly outrageous. After reading their messages, Joan felt inexplicably insulted. Anyone wishing to return their algae oxygen generator may privately message me. I will refund you with 100 basic materials. Joan remained unperturbed. The algae oxygen generators were currently valuable yet scarce, and since some wished to return theirs, he simply refunded them their basic materials. He did not believe that everyone was foolish. When 10 individuals approached him for a refund of their algae oxygen generators, Joan ungrudgingly returned the 100 basic materials to each of them and subsequently added these 10 individuals to the blacklist of purchasers for the algae oxygen generator. He relisted 10 algae oxygen generators, priced at 100 basic materials each, with a note that those who act swiftly would reap the rewards while the slow would miss out. Joan then re-entered the trading channel and sent a message in the global communication channel. Why are only 10 people requesting refunds? Are the remaining 20 individuals foolish, unaware that they have been deceived? To one's astonishment, the item was relisted, and one must wonder how the seller could face the public after being exposed. Did he truly believe there would still be unsuspecting buyers? However, in the next moment, those who sought refunds were met with a swift reversal of fortunes. 10 oxygen-producing algae tanks appeared in the global trading channel and were instantly sold. Indeed, there are fools willing to trade. We have already tested this and found the algae tanks to be utterly useless. Yes, it confirms the adage. The prevalence of fraudsters is merely a reflection of the greater number of gullible individuals. It is difficult to assess these people. We have already borne the burden of their folly, and yet there are still those who fall prey to deception. Chapter 27. Golden Silk Fruit. Joe, when chuckled as he observed the refund seekers making a commotion in the world channel, choosing not to intervene, as it felt akin to watching a performance by jesters. However, he was somewhat taken aback to notice that not a single person informed them that without the algae oxygen tanks, they might have suffocated by now rather than clamoring for refunds. Furthermore, through the trading information, Joan discovered that one of the loudest refund seekers had just completed a transaction for an algae oxygen tank in the global trading channel. Upon comparing this individual to the blacklist of the 10 refund seekers, he realized that this person was not on the blacklist. Joan had set the system to prevent repeat purchases, meaning this individual had never previously traded for an algae oxygen tank. It appeared that this person had deliberately instigated the group of refund seekers to incite their claims, seizing the opportunity to make a transaction while everyone else remained oblivious. Oh, my heavens, this world is rife with deceit and falsehoods. Joan gazed at the messages in the communication channel, awaiting the arrival of the first supply crate of the day. Nearly 3 hours had passed, and Joan's body had nearly recovered. As the tide receded, he discovered that no creatures accompanied the supply crate. He leapt from the wooden platform and opened the crate. Ding! Obtained bread X1. Obtained mineral water X1. The contents were food and water, which left Joe when feeling rather uninspired. He simply collected the items and returned to the wooden platform. continuing to await the second supply crate. During this interval, Zhou received a private message. Upon opening it, he discovered it was from Chun Xian. Mr. Zhou, I would like to trade some items with you. The second algae oxygenator requires a blueprint for trading. Zhou could surmise what Chun Xian sought to exchange, so he directly stated his price. But my first one was also traded for a blueprint, wasn't it? That cannot be said. It is you who wishes to obtain the algae oxygenator ahead of time and voluntarily trades using the blueprint, not a proposition I made. Of course, I'm not a greedy merchant. Although your first algae oxygenator was acquired early through a blueprint trade, I can consider it as not being your first. You may still trade for one using 100 basic materials in the trading channel. Mr. Zhou, you truly are a great benefactor. Chen Xian could not help but make a sarcastic remark, as Zhou's words appeared grandiose, yet were utterly vacuous. Selling merely 20 units per day, how could she possibly compete with 100 million people for a transaction? Ultimately, to acquire a second unit directly from Zhou, she would still require the blueprints. I cannot claim to be a benefactor. I merely possess a tinge of compassion, recognizing the difficulties faced by others. Zhou, of course, was aware of Chun Xian's sarcasm, yet it did not concern him. The initiative lay with him. If she wished to trade, she would. If not, so be it. Well, I shan't jest with Mr. Zhou any longer. The reason I sought you out is that I have come into possession of something remarkable, which I believe you would find valuable. As soon as Chun Xian sent this message, she followed it up with details about the item, prompting Zhou to click on it in curiosity. Golden silk fruit, seeds of golden seaweed. Upon consumption, strength 5. Zhou inhaled sharply upon reading the details. An increase of 5 points in strength was precisely what he desperately needed. Where did you acquire this? Given the description, it seems rather advantageous and quite valuable. How about we trade for one algae oxygenation chamber? Since Mr. Zhou is not interested, I shall seek another trader, she replied. Oh, come now if you're dissatisfied. We can negotiate. Just tell me what you desire. Zhou, when initially intended to feign disinterest to diminish the perceived value. But it was evident that Chen Xian was no fool. Therefore, he decided to dispense with pretense and directly invited her to make an offer. I require 20 algae oxygenation chambers, a complete set of spiky shrimp shell equipment, and my fishbone blade blueprint. Bring along your golden silk fruit and depart gracefully. Zhou chuckled in exasperation. You have come here to negotiate, starting with a demand for 20 algae oxygen generators, followed by a set of spiked armor. And now you even wish to reclaim the blueprints for the fishbone blade. Such audacity is truly shameless. You are indeed a lion opening its mouth wide. Those 18 algae oxygen generators, a set of spiked krill shell equipment, and my fishbone blade blueprints. Miss Chun, I shall not engage in a protracted discussion. We are both astute individuals. While I do not consider myself a paragon of virtue, our previous dealings have been relatively fair. This is likely the very reason you sought me out. I shall not allow you to suffer loss either. 10 algae oxygen generators and the spiked armor are acceptable. I can craft a fishbone blade for you, but the blueprints will remain with me. If you require the blueprints, you are well aware of the value of the algae oxygen generators. You may procure the blueprints through other means. This is my sincere offer. Should you remain unsatisfied, I suggest you seek alternative arrangements. I acknowledge Mr. Zhou's sincerity, yet the value of my blueprints is substantial. Since you're unwilling to trade the blueprints, I would like to request something else. Does Miss Chun believe herself clever, treating others as fools? The blueprints for the fishbone blade are not yours, but mine. You voluntarily engaged in our previous transaction. Regretting it now and attempting to increase the price is unacceptable. Mr. Zhou has misunderstood. I do not intend to raise the price. I merely feel that the terms you presented fall slightly short. Thus, I hope you can enhance the offer. What else do you desire? The golden silk fruit holds significant importance for Zhou. As long as Chen Xian does not demand exorbitant prices, he is willing to make further concessions. I wonder what other items or blueprints Mr. Zhou possesses. Could you share them with me? I would like to see if there is anything I might need. I have already stated that trading blueprints is impossible. I'm not seeking the blueprints themselves. I merely wish to examine the items they produce to determine if any of them are of use to me. Upon reading Chun Xian's message, Zhou, who had initially felt a tinge of impatience, suddenly furrowed his brow. This inquiry seems to delve into my resources. Blueprints are meant for the construction or creation of items. Knowing a person's complete set of blueprints allows one to gauge their level of development. With possession of the algae oxygenator blueprint, Zhou undoubtedly stands as one of the fastest developing individuals in this world. I cannot disclose the types of blueprints. Instead, I will offer you two particularly valuable items. What items? Realizing her intentions had been uncovered, Chen Xian refrained from further commentary. Her curiosity piqued by Zhou's mention of significant items. Two wooden platforms, each 1 meter high and occupying an area of 1 square meter. With these, you will no longer need to dwell in seawater, and you can even sleep on them, avoiding the damp ground. After reading Zhou's description, Chen Xian's eyes sparkled. Indeed, these are exceptionally valuable items. Currently, within the belly of the illusory Leviathan, there is little danger. One could even assert it is quite safe, with the only caution needed being against the sharp, spiny shrimp while transporting seaweed, as there are essentially no other threats. In the absence of peril, and with the ability to preliminarily address the issue of sustenance, the ultimate pursuit becomes the comfort of life. Immersing oneself daily up to the waist in seawater, followed by resting upon a damp surface, can hardly be deemed comfortable. The wooden platform serves as the quintessential solution to this dilemma. Chapter 28. Seaweed Cultivation Box. Mr. Zhou is most sincere. The transaction is pleasant. Miss Chen, how would you prefer to conduct the trade? Let us list it on the trading channel. What a private transaction. Currently, Mr. Zhou, I presume you do not possess an excess of 10 algae oxygenators? Indeed, I do not. What I propose is that Miss Chen advance the transaction of the golden silk fruit to me, and I shall subsequently compensate for the items later. Cuyist, Mr. Zhou, not at all. I am entirely serious. I understand that Miss Chen might fear my lack of integrity. Yet from my dealings with others over the past few days, it should be evident that I am a person of honor. The golden silk fruit is quite significant to me. The sooner I acquire it, the better. I will initially trade you a set of spiked armor and 2 wooden platforms, and I will make haste to complete the remainder. Is a fishbone blade not currently producible? The materials required for the fishbone blade consist of a 1-meter-long fish vertebra, a rarity you are undoubtedly aware of. Chen Xian contemplated Mr. Zhou's request for an advanced transaction for a moment, ultimately deciding to acquiesce. She had, in fact, observed Mr. Zhou for some time. Although he possessed a hint of a shrewd merchant's demeanor, his trades had remained relatively equitable. Add 2 algae oxygenators to the deal, and I shall agree to the early transaction of the golden silk fruit to you. Certainly, a total of 12. Subsequently, Zhou promptly crafted the spiked chest plate, spike leg guards, spike boots, spike groin protector, spike bracers, spike helmet, and spike belt, consuming a total of 38 shrimp shells. With 7 pieces of spiked equipment and 2 wooden platforms, he sent a trade request and successfully exchanged for the golden silk fruit in Chen Xian's possession. I hope Mr. Zhou will honor our agreement. Rest assured, one must possess credibility to foster mutual benefit. This principle is well understood by me. Upon concluding the trade with Chen Xian, Zhou gazed at the golden silk fruit in his hand, his heart brimming with exhilaration. His joy was not solely derived from the 5-point strength increase afforded by the fruit, but rather from the revelation that it was a seed of the golden silk seagrass. The moment Zhou encountered this description, his excitement became nearly uncontrollable, yet he skillfully maintained his composure to prevent the astute Chen Xian from detecting any anomaly. It appeared that the blueprints uncovered within the supply box were indeed valuable, albeit their time for utility had not yet arrived. Zhou pondered, opening the system interface and navigating to the blueprint section to study the seagrass cultivation box blueprint, his smile growing more radiant. Construct. Without hesitation, Zhou initiated the construction. The materials required for the seagrass cultivation box amounted to 20 stones, and glancing at the pile of stones accumulated in the corner, he was well supplied. However, the world system did not respond. Zhou re-examined the seagrass cultivation box blueprint and realized that seawater was also necessary. Thus, he would have to await the arrival of the second supply box before he could proceed with the construction. Zhou cautiously stowed away the golden silk fruit, although Chen Xian did not disclose the manner in which she acquired it. The description of the golden silk fruit indicated that it was a seed of the golden silk seagrass, suggesting that Chen Xian had encountered this particular seagrass. Previously, she possessed only a single algae oxygenation tank, limiting her speed in transporting seagrass. Moreover, based on the timing of Chen Xian's request for trade, it was evident that this occurred shortly after she had finished transporting the seagrass. Thus, it was clear that the golden silk seagrass had not been obtained from a supply crate, but was instead a rare variety found within the seagrass itself, fortuitously stumbled upon by Chun Xian. Indeed, luck had eluded me. I am but a wretched soul, with little else to occupy his time. Zhou Wen continued to recline on the wooden platform, awaiting the arrival of the second supply crate. After a span of 2 to 3 hours, the esophageal membrane opened, allowing the sea to surge in, heralding the arrival of the second supply crate. However, this time, the water was teeming with life. Zhou Wen concealed himself behind the algae oxygenation tank and proceeded to access the blueprint interface, crafting the seagrass planting box. As the water receded, he heard the familiar plop of a creature, and upon directing his light towards the sound, he indeed spotted a shimmering ribbon fish leaping about. Recognizing the creature in the water as a shimmering ribbon fish, Zhou Wen felt a sense of relief and leapt down from the wooden platform to inspect the newly constructed seagrass planting box. The appearance of the algae planting box resembled that of the algae oxygenation tank, albeit it was double in size. It was a stone trough measuring 1 meter in length, width, and height, brimming with seawater and filled with an abundance of small pebbles at the bottom. At first, Zhou Wen was puzzled by the absence of soil and the materials used to construct the seaweed planting box, wondering where the golden silk fruit would be planted. Upon noticing the small stones accumulated at the bottom, he realized these stones were designated as the planting medium. Zhou Wen carefully excavated a small pit within the pile of stones, gently placed the golden silk fruit into the hollow, and delicately covered it with stones. He pondered how long it would take for the golden silk seaweed to mature and bear fruit, surmising that, given the fruit's capacity to enhance strength by 5 points, its growth period must be considerable, certainly longer than that of watermelons and sweet potatoes. This thought led him to recall the rudimentary fertilizer he had crafted not long ago. Though he was uncertain if it would be suitable for fertilizing the golden silk seaweed, he decided to wait until the golden silk fruit sprouted before addressing that concern. With the golden silk fruit now planted, Zhou Wen sought out the second supply box of the day and opened it. Ding! Obtained equipment slot X1. An equipment slot? The item he had just acquired momentarily left Zhou Wen in a state of astonishment before a notification appeared on his character attribute panel. Upon accessing the character attributes interface, he noticed a blue box had materialized beside the attributes panel. Equipment slot allows for the storage of 1 piece of equipment or weapon. Zhou Wen clicked on the blue box, and a message flashed in his mind, clarifying the function of the equipment slot. He attempted to place the spiked chest armor into the equipment slot. After a flash of blue light, the spiked armor appeared in the slot, and with a mere thought, it manifested upon his person. What a marvelous item! Zhou Wen exclaimed in astonishment. Zhou Wen was undoubtedly aware of the equipment slot, being an avid gamer for over a decade. However, he was quite astonished to discover that such a feature could also be utilized in this world. Yet, the equipment slot was limited to a single piece of armor or weapon at a time, and through experimentation, he found it could not accommodate items beyond equipment. Food, water, and basic materials were all excluded. It appeared that the equipment slot could be acquired multiple times, with only 1 slot available for each piece of equipment. Zhou Wen currently possessed 7 pieces of spiked armor, and with the addition of the fishbone dagger, he had a total of 8 pieces of equipment. Thus, it became evident that he needed to gather more slots, as having just 1 was rather insufficient. After experimenting with the equipment slot for a while, Zhou Wen processed the mirror-scaled salmon, dividing the fish meat into 3 portions, which he then listed on the trading channel in exchange for an equipment slot. However, he felt the likelihood of a successful trade was rather slim, and thus, he approached it with a sense of casualness. The fish bones were reserved for crafting a fishbone blade, which he subsequently traded to Chun Xian in exchange for a new one. Chapter 29, Storage Cabinet. Did you not mention that selling the mirror-scaled salmon would enhance both constitution and speed? As Zhou Wen completed the trade of the fishbone blade to Chun Xian, she sent him an inquiry. Indeed, would you like some? Yes, at what price? 2 algae oxygenators. Mr. Zhou, you certainly do not allow anyone to take advantage of you. Has Miss Chun not benefited at all? The golden silk fruit grants 5 points of strength, and you requisitioned a considerable amount from me. The mirror-scaled salmon meat provides only 2 points of attributes. Thus, I require 2 algae oxygenators. What advantage have I gained? Can strength be compared to other attributes? Forget it. I no longer require those 2 algae oxygenators. Instead, please provide me with a portion of the mirror-scale pike meat. Zhou Wen, with a sense of satisfaction, removed a portion of mirror-scale pike meat from the trading channel and transferred it to Chun Xian. It is always advantageous to secure even a single portion of the illusory Leviathan's sustenance. After resting for the duration of 2 supply crates, Zhouwen's stamina had nearly fully recuperated. He still had 100 push-ups left to complete today. It would be unwise to abandon the plan he had set forth yesterday. Thus, he dedicated the subsequent time to fulfilling his daily regimen of 100 push-ups. Upon completing the 100 push-ups, it was nearly time for the 3rd supply crate of the day. Zhouwen cast a glance at the decaying corpses of the anchorhead worms piled in the corner. As the remains were inedible and took up considerable space, Zhouwen employed a fishbone knife to slice the corpses into smaller segments, subsequently disposing of them in a digestion pool. After a while, the 3rd supply crate of the day arrived. The water lay still, devoid of any creatures. Once the tide receded, Zhouwen successfully opened the supply crate. Ding! Acquired storage cabinet blueprint. Zhouwen was momentarily taken aback, only to be engulfed by elation. Truly, fate has favored me. Just as I was pondering what to do with the resources acquired through trade, I have been granted a storage cabinet blueprint. With a beaming smile, Zhouwen utilized the blueprint and examined the materials required for its construction. Storage cabinet blueprint requires wood X20. The materials required were minimal. Thus, he proceeded with the crafting. Zhouwen's finger pressed upon the crafting button on the blueprint interface, and 20 pieces of timber soared from the resource box, transforming into a radiant blue light that coalesced mid-air into a wooden cabinet, standing 2 meters tall and 1 meter wide. According to the specifications detailed in the blueprint, the cabinet housed 100 compartments, each capable of accommodating 100 units of materials. Thus, a single cabinet could store up to 10,000 units of basic supplies. Although Zhouwen possessed a considerable amount of foundational materials, totaling just over 3,000, this was insufficient to fill even half of the cabinet's capacity. The primary advantage was its compact footprint, requiring merely 1 square meter of space to contain all the supplies. Once the cabinet was positioned, Zhouwen promptly set about transferring the 900 stones that had been stacked in the corner into it, followed by the complete relocation of all items from the resource boxes into the cabinet. Half an hour later, the contents of the 22 resource boxes had been entirely transferred, rendering these empty boxes obsolete. He then proceeded to list 10 of the resource boxes in the trading channel, discarding the remaining 12 directly into the disposal pool as refuse. Zhouwen refrained from listing all 22 boxes at once, as this would inadvertently reveal to others that he had been acquiring 3 resource boxes daily since day 1. Exposing his hand, while he could claim to have engaged in trades with others, the seeds of suspicion, once sown, would surely attract unwarranted attention, a situation he wished to avoid. Human nature is inherently greedy. Although encounters between survivors are improbable at present, what of the future? It is not scarcity that breeds concern, but inequality. Should conflicts arise later on, Zhouwen would undoubtedly find himself in the crosshairs of scrutiny. Zhouwen did not set an excessively high price for the 10 supply boxes, as they were commonplace and most individuals lacked abundant basic materials. Many could not even fill their own supplies, rendering additional purchases unnecessary. Thus, Zhouwen priced each supply box at 10 units of basic materials, a sum that would be quite affordable for those engaged in trading such boxes, as they likely possessed a surplus of basic materials. Moreover, Zhouwen had another motive for selling the supply boxes, to discern which individuals were advancing rapidly. Those in need of supply boxes likely had limited capacity for basic materials, indicating they possessed items for long-term sale in exchange for basic materials. After a brief wait, someone indeed purchased the supply boxes, acquiring all 10 in one go. Zhouwen glanced at the buyer's avatar, which appeared unfamiliar, suggesting he had not interacted with this person before. Consequently, Zhouwen began to peruse the World Trading Channel. After sifting through various trade listings for a while, he encountered an item offered by this individual. Filtered freshwater, 10 units of basic materials. Filtered freshwater? Upon seeing the listing for freshwater, Zhouwen's eyes widened slightly. This was undoubtedly a lucrative and enduring business venture. Why had I not discovered the method for obtaining filtered freshwater? A twinge of jealousy stirred within him. Yet this sentiment dissipated upon reading the description of the filtered freshwater. Filtered freshwater, water obtained through simple filtration of urine, suitable for minimal consumption. Well, I initially thought it was seawater filtration, but it turned out to be urine filtration, and quite a rudimentary one at that. However, upon reflection, it is understandable. After all, where can one find materials to filter seawater and urine nowadays? Originally, Zhou intended to inquire whether the other party sold methods for filtering freshwater, but he quickly abandoned this notion. A glance at the acquisition details revealed a substantial demand for urine. Suddenly, Zhou became acutely aware of a pressing issue. The majority of survivors in this world are enduring extreme hardships. The fact that the sale of water filtered from urine can be exchanged for resources that exceed the capacity of supply crates speaks volumes about the scarcity of water. Yet, it hardly concerns me. My own situation is far from ideal. Just today, I narrowly escaped drowning from an attack by 2 anchorworms, and my existence is fraught with difficulties, although I am not lacking in sustenance. Wait a moment. While this filtered freshwater may not be suitable for drinking in large quantities, it could serve to irrigate my watermelon and sweet potato crops, thereby conserving my bottled water. This realization struck Zhou, prompting him to immediately trade 100 basic materials for 10 bottles of filtered freshwater. The leaves of the watermelon and sweet potato plants have already filled the entirety of the small planting boxes. The larger the plants grow, the more fresh water they require. And this filtered water is the perfect solution. Zhou poured a bottle of filtered freshwater into each of the 2 small planting boxes, leaving the remaining 8 bottles beside them for convenient future use. The primary reason, however, lies in the fact that the bottle designed for filtering freshwater is essentially a mineral water bottle. Zhou fears that if left in the storage cabinet, he might inadvertently mistake it for mineral water one day, which would truly be quite unpleasant.